Before time began, there was the Triple Takeover Toycast. We know not where it comes from, only that it holds the power to create fortnightly podcasts and fill them with talk of Transformers and other related toy lines. That is how episode 14 on the 2007 Transformers feature film was born. For a time, my co-hosts and I lived in harmony, but like all great power, some wanted it for good, others for evil. I am joined by a writer and photographer who has a mystical bond between toys and rum. It's Liam from Toybox Soapbox.
My mum says I am never speechless. This is proof that she's wrong. Oh my god, this is incredible.
Also joining us is a toy writer, YouTuber and photographer, a super advanced photographer, probably Japanese. It's eBay user ladiesman260.
Fantastic. Why on earth didn't they get you to do the Optimus Prime voice for the WFC cartoon? You would have been brilliant at it.
And I'm M.A.S.K from TFsquareone. A podcast don't pick the episode picks the podcast. Join us as we take a look at the lead-up, release, reaction, and some of the toys from the 2007 Transformers movie. Bring it.
Absolutely wonderful, mate. What can I say? Loved it. You brought the rain.
That's left cheek.
How are you lads doing?
I don't think we can ever top that. I think my next one, I'm just going to have to retire and just come in and just do it like in the style of Ringo Starr, like, hello, it's episode 15. And that's it.
If you can pull off Ringo Starr, mate, I think you've won already. Is that going to be the episode on trains? Are you basically going to do Thomas the Tank Engine as Richard Starkey?
Sorry, I zoned out for a minute there and suddenly we're talking about pulling off Ringo Starr. I don't know what the... I was just checking my notes.
We're only talking about the train.
What's going on?
Notes, amateur.
I know, tell me about it. I'm not going to write something down. I'm getting old, mate. 2007 was a long time ago.
Oh, very long time ago. 14 years now.
I know.
14
shocking,
years since the Transformers live-action movie debut.
Absolutely shocking. And yet it seems like yesterday. So funny.
There are people who watch that as children who are grown-ups now. That's how scary that is.
It's when you realise that people got into Transformers through that movie because they saw it as a kid, and that was like their first exposure. And I think it's fantastic. Don't get me wrong. Like I love that, but also for considering that I'm in the category of people that it was kind of coming back to Transformers and all of that. It's very scary how much time has passed. It's really quite terrifying.
Yeah, if you think of yourself being in that movie theatre with someone who'd taken their kid, and that kid is probably now collecting Transformers and is online commenting on your social media posts, that's quite mental. Thinking about it that way.
Absolutely. Well, I saw something recently. Someone was pointing out that actually there was longer between now, as in today, and the 2007 movie than there was between the 2007 movie and the end of Generation 1.
That's something we mention every time we do one of these reflective episodes.
We have to stop measuring time by the end of Generation 1 because we're just going to be very depressed. There's going to be an episode where we're just drunk, like, God, end it now.
I love that it's like a common theme of this podcast. Like, how much time has passed and how old do you feel?
Yes.
I don't know.
But I did have that on Twitter the other day. Somebody was talking about the movie and they were like, oh, wow, I was dead little when that came out. They were like 6. And I'm like, how old are you now? And they're like, 45. What?
Yeah, sounds about
all right. So 2007 movie, episode 14. Just want to be absolutely clear that this is not going to be an episode where we are doing a film review. We're going to be, like I said, talking about all of the fandom buzz and backlash around the movie. We're going to talk a little bit about the toys and where we were and just that sort of thing. It's more of like a flashback to the time, and the film is involved. We're going to talk about the soundtrack and the music and the character choices and all that stuff. But would also like to say that episode 14 of Triple Takeover is sponsored by TF Source. So please do pop along to tfsource.com. Plenty of movie toys there, for example. That includes Masterpiece movie toys, the original movie toy line because they have vintage stuff, and also third-party movie products. So tfsource.com, check them out, and thank you guys for sponsoring us.
How scary is it that you just referred to movie toys as vintage toys?
That's a fact, isn't it? It's like, I'm thinking about these toys because I bought them at the time and they do feel of a completely different era now. Like you take a 2007 movie toy and compare it to a modern movie toy and it's a slightly different thing.
Yeah, they're very much like the G1 of movie toys, aren't they? The toys from the time. It's like they're kind of... it's almost like looking at modern versions of G1 toys versus the G1 toys from the time, the difference in style and everything. It's really frightening.
Yeah, and at least now I've got at least I have the memory of buying these toys and what it was like and what the stores looked like. Like back in the Binaltech episode, we were talking about the Toys R Us in Times Square in the US. I mean, I remember going there after seeing the movie in 2007 and seeing the wall of toys they had and the standee that they had next to it. I remember there were loads of those Protoform Optimus Prime toys, the one
Yeah.
that basically looked like a pointy rock.
Yeah.
Wall of those. So yeah, that's really fresh in my mind, and all of the displays in the UK, like in Woolworths versus Toys R Us versus anything. So yeah, I'm just glad I've got the whole picture as far as that era is concerned. There's no big gaps in my memory.
It's a really strange one, isn't it? Because I think we've talked about this in previous episodes as well. The fact that actually pre 2007 was such a different era, and actually now I think coming into the fandom, it's really hard to appreciate what it was like prior to the film coming out and the difference that it made, the huge impact that it made. The fact that at the time, obviously Transformers was well known, but it was something that was thought about as being in the past, even though it was still current. So even though there was Unicron trilogy and whatever at the time, it still wasn't really present in people's minds. Whereas now, not a day goes by I don't see, some reference to Transformers in kind of popular culture or whatever, and it's much more prevalent in sort of everyday dialogue that it was at the time. It was like a real niche thing. So it's just, I don't know, to me it's fascinating the difference that movie made. Love or hate that film, have your opinions on it by all means. It put Transformers back on the map.
You can't understate how important that film, that whole time was for what it set in motion now, the way we have Transformers and the amount of releases we get. It's completely different in every way. And it did. And it's the reason why, one of the reasons why Transformers is like the only one of those 80s kids' toy brands, other than Ninja Turtles, that's lasted. And it's still in the public consciousness, like He-Man and things like that. They all drifted away for years, didn't they? They never made that comeback. Whereas Transformers did. And it's pretty much the only one that did. Like, no one talks about Masks or Thundercats other than people like us, don't they? But in the wider consciousness, people go, I remember that when I was little, or I wasn't alive. What on earth are you talking about?
100%. And I think, and I know we've said this before, but I think that Transformers would have come back. I think if it had gone away and the movie hadn't happened and it had dulled off like He-Man or whatever, I think it would have come back at some point, maybe for a film property, maybe for a Netflix show or whatever. I don't know, a bit like He-Man is now. But it wouldn't have been the global phenomenon that it is, for sure. And I think I know people have opinions of it, and a lot of people didn't like the film, and we'll get into all of that. But it's had a huge impact on the overall franchise, and definitely as Transformers fans, I think you have to respect that.
Oh God, no! It's funny what you said a little bit earlier. You were talking about pre-movie and what the scene was like, and because the movies and Bayformers and products to do with Bayformers like studio series are still such a prevalent part of the modern toy line that are being released right now. Loads of fans of it around. We're still talking about live action movies because now obviously Rise of the Beasts is around and being talked about. So I still feel very much in that bubble of the era of the live action movie for Transformers. But 1 year before the 2007 movie, classics were introduced. And that blows my mind because that's a connection to a completely different era of collecting for me and just of being involved in this hobby as someone who was not yet married, someone who didn't have kids, someone who lived somewhere else in a different country and was working a totally different job and was a different person. And that's connected simply 1 year before this movie came out. So yeah, in 2007, when the movie came out, let's talk a little bit about what the Transformers scene was like apart from classics. What were people buying? What was Transformers at that time?
The Unicron trilogy, wasn't it? We're still in the midst of there. Which one was it? Was it Energon or Cybertron at that point?
Well, we would have been 2007. We would have been to the end of it, wouldn't we? So it would have been I think Cybertron would have been out at that stage. I'd need to double check exact dates or whatever. But Armada was 2003. So I mean, it must have been towards the end of it by that point.
Yeah. 07 was the end of alternators and Binaltech as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that was all done and dusted. But it was almost like it came at a good time, the 2007 film, in a way, because it felt like actually the one casualty of all of it, in my mind, is animated. That's the one that was because that was in sort of full swing or whatever, and obviously that kind of got gazumped essentially.
Not animated. Animated started in 2008.
Did it?
Yeah.
Yeah, but it would have been in production
Right.
at this time, wouldn't it?
Yes.
They would have been
you're absolutely right.
pressing
You're
ahead.
absolutely right. I'm getting my dates mixed up. But no, but it's still. But you could see that animated got curtailed by things like Prime and what have you that came as a result of the film. So maybe it's just more the influence than anything.
So further down the line, yeah, because I remember animated was introduced at BotCon 2007, literally just the day that we'd just seen the first trailer, the first proper trailer.
Same time.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, now I'm getting my dates confused. Yeah, no, we'd actually watched the movie at that BotCon, and then they'd shown animated. So it was almost like, here's the children's thing that's going to happen now. As a, we've got the grown-up movie. This is going to go on to big screen. That's just come out in summer 2007, and then animated was premiered. The trailer for animated was premiered at BotCon 2007. I remember that clearly. And they had like painted hand painted prototypes of the first wave of animated toys that they were showing off at BotCon 2007. But certainly, like, classics were around, and I think G1 reissues were sort of on the wane a little bit, weren't they? Because it's pre-Encore at that time, and I reckon Collector's Edition is basically tailing off at that point as well, and we're not getting a lot of G1 reissues. I think Commemorative was virtually done. Like we weren't getting those regular releases that we were before, and certainly not from Japan, I don't think.
In that case, I don't really know what the next thing would have been if it wasn't for 2007. I don't know what would have come next. I'm not really clued up. I've got to be honest. For me, at that time, it's post Vinyl Tech, kind of a bit of a no man's land almost. You know what I mean? In terms of collecting, like I was into Vinyl Tech, and then nothing else really at that point in time. Anyway, obviously I've gone back and kind of appreciated some of it since. So yeah, who's to say?
So before we get into the hype surrounding the movie and the build up to its release, this is kind of a typical question for us on this podcast every time we go back and look at a various toy line. But what were you doing in 2007?
I'd not long left working for Rare, so I'd been on like a 6-month drinking bender with no work and just spending money. And it went up the proverbial wall, basically. So by the time 2007 had come around, I was still digging myself back out of that hole that I'd left myself in. And so I was still buying like classics and stuff, but not very much. But 2007 was not long after I'd just met my girlfriend, who I'm still with now. And was just doing that, drinking, going to gigs.
And you, Sixo?
Yeah, well, I was going to say a similar story, but sort of, in some parts of it anyway. I'd actually just moved to London in 2006 from where I was before, and I'd moved to London because I had quite a sizable promotion with the job that I was at, but I needed to move for work for that. And so I'd spent the sort of first bit of 2006 living in a very small studio apartment and everything, and then met my girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife, and met her in 2007, and we ended up moving in together quite quickly. And so that was really kind of the big thing, I guess, in 2007. That was where I was at, working a lot, and obviously kind of new relationship and all of that. So it's strange to think actually that was all those years later. I remember going with my then girlfriend, now wife, to watch Transformers with some friends at the cinema, with some old friends of ours. So it's a strange thing to kind of think of that it feels so recent, but actually in terms of life, it was, pre kids and all of that. And it's, a long time ago. So yeah, it does feel kind of strange. And there was some drinking involved as well along the way, I'm sure, but of course, but enjoying the London scene. But yeah, all of that feels so long ago, really.
It's funny that both of you met your partners in 2007. It is exactly the same for me. I met my then girlfriend, now wife, in 2007, and it was exactly around the time of the release of the movie. So I had gone to BotCon 2007 in Rhode Island, and on our way back, myself and Paul Hitchens from the Space Bridge, we stopped off in New York because it was basically just going to be like a little addition to our trip to the US. And I met my wife, my now wife, in New York. She was a flight attendant for Iceland Air and was in New York with her friend. So we went to a comedy club. I think it was Comedy Cellar. I think Chris Rock was on that night as well. He'd just shown up. But there were other people on the bill as well. So we'd met in the queue, and or at least that's the way I'm supposed to tell the story. We met in the queue, and we sat together at the table as well, a group of 4, my friend and her friend. And it's funny because I'd seen the movie at that point, and a number of the comedians that night had made reference to the Transformers movie. And in Times Square, there was a massive Transformers poster. And so it was obviously like starting to make its way into the consciousness. So that whole period of time of that movie's release and that summer is very closely tied to me meeting my wife as well. It's they're almost inextricable because I remember that time very clearly, and meeting her was as part of my trip to BotCon to see that movie and all of that kind of stuff. So yeah, 2007, big year for us, eh?
Yeah, evidently so.
I feel I need to issue a correction here. I actually met my girlfriend in 2006. And I'm saying this because if she hears this, then she knows I actually remember. It was 2006, straight after download. And what's scary is you guys are both married to your partners and have children, and we're still not married and we have a dog. I love you, Emily. Thank you for being a patron.
Well, if it helps, my wife is not a patron of the podcast, so I don't know. You must be doing something right.
I hope so. I doubt it.
That's a funny one, actually, because my wife was really interested in tonight's topic, and I wonder if that is because of the connection to us. That because obviously she went to see the movie as well with her friends. We didn't see it together, but she was quite interested in what we would talk about tonight because it's so closely linked to that period of time. I don't think she was quite as interested in the packaging episode details.
Yes, no,
not even part 2.
My wife was similarly a bit perplexed by that as a topic of conversation. But it is interesting because actually, at the time she was quite I wouldn't say into the movie as such, but she did really enjoy it, and just as kind of a more casual kind of aspect. But she even actually had a couple of the toys, like she had a Bumblebee toy from the time that she really liked, and that was always like, oh, this is my one and what have you. So she was really into that, and ever since that film she's always kind of had a bit of an affinity with that character. So when he pops up, like we were watching RID 2015 not so long ago with our son, and she was really kind of into that character even then. It's sort of carried on all those years. It's quite funny. So I think I think that film, I think it did reach a lot of people that wouldn't have been fans of Transformers otherwise. It's it did cross that threshold.
My girlfriend's exactly the same. She loved, because we went to watch it together, and she absolutely loved it and went out and bought the voice changing helmet and everything. She liked it that much.
Wow.
All of that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Have you still got it?
I do. I actually have it here.
Oh my god!
So now
the listeners can't hear this, but
oh my god!
That's how you're doing the rest of the episode, I think.
He's wearing it.
I think I just inhaled a spider.
Oh, God.
So, you know what's funny? I tried the voice changing thing earlier, and it still works. It still.
Why don't you have it on now?
Yeah.
Are we not going to get a sample for the show?
Did you not hear the bit about me inhaling a spider?
Okay, it's inside you now. It's done. So
exactly. Move on. You can't tease something like this and not have it on the recording. That's just
okay.
Come on.
Let's
get that thing on.
Show not tell.
My God, it looks massive.
Hello?
This is quality podcasting right here.
Yeah.
Can you hear that? Roger Dodger. Freedom is the right of all spiders. Up my nose.
I don't think who knew Optimus Prime was from Nottingham and sounded just like Liam?
Hey.
I don't think it works anymore, buddy.
I think it's seen better days.
It just...
Yeah.
Could you hear it just going?
That's all, yeah. Prime's dead, obviously. Okay, so before we get into the movie, do you guys remember the build-up to the movie? So, all the trailers and the TV spots and the very first teaser of the Mars rover and the footage of the shadow and everything. So,
the Beagle.
Right, can you remember clearly where you were when you saw that, and were you connected to the community at the time? Do you remember how people were reacting to it?
Yes and no, I guess. I wasn't I had an online presence. I had been online. I wasn't online so much at that time, I don't think. Just kind of casually here and there. Like, I had been on TFW 2005 for years at that point, maybe 5 years or so, but it wasn't really that present or anything. But yeah, I know. I remember the teaser hugely so, and watching it and so excited. I mean, it was real like freeze frame stuff, kind of going through it, like that shot of Megatron in that teaser. There was a lot of promise in that. It's interesting now looking back at it retrospectively, because it was very, very different, that initial teaser, to what we actually got, to the actual film. Even the style of the I think it is meant to be Megatron, quite clearly, the kind of silhouette or whatever. Maybe that.
I thought it was Starscream.
I was just Bumblebee.
Oh, right. Okay. Well, I'm saying Megatron, but maybe not then. I always assumed it was Megatron. But maybe there isn't a definitive answer. Maybe it's just some generic, whoever. But
it's M.A.S.K.
Yeah, it could well be. Right. Absolutely. Yeah. One of the Rainmakers or something. I don't know. Yeah.
It's a mini spy. No, wait, that's the Mars rover.
Someone screaming at the thing now. They're like shouting, "It's this Mars rover
Someone
toy
will
from
know. There'll be
or
an
something like that
answer
right now."
Yeah, there'll be an actual answer, and we don't know, which is criminal. But no, there's a lot of promise in that. Even the music at the end, the style of the eye, which was on the poster as well. Do you remember the first teaser poster, which was all like the tagline, like "Our war." What was it? "Our world, their war," or "Their war, our world."
Right.
Yeah.
So all of that was really different from then what actually came. And I think the first proper trailer was still really eerie, but that was more representative of the actual film.
Do you remember you had to download it in like QuickTime as well? Do you remember that's how you got trailers?
On Apple,
you would
Apple
download
trailers.
a QuickTime file. Yeah, and that's what I remember, like having to wait for it to download, because those were the times, as was the style of the time. And I just remember like just being in awe.
Yeah, you're right. I remember. I mean, I loved watching film. I always love watching film trailers, even now. But yeah, you're right. I remember downloading it on QuickTime and all of that. And yeah, absolutely incredible.
Because YouTube was about, but it wasn't like stuff where every single trailer went straight away, was it? It wasn't like that at that time.
No, it wasn't quite the machine that it is now.
I remember seeing the poster the year before in 2006 in Kentucky. I'd gone to BotCon 2006, and we'd gone to Louisville, I think, and just gone to see, what was it, Jackass, second Jackass movie at that point.
Oh my God.
And they had a poster saying that, with that eye, the movie was coming the year after. So I remember that. But then we had, like you say, something with some actual film footage in it. The next trailer that came.
Right. Yeah, it was so different. Yeah. And quite, I watched it again today, actually, and I do love that trailer. It's very creepy. It's like a really creepy trailer. It's weird. It's got a very... It's more representative of the film, but the tone is exceptionally different. So none of the comedic value of the actual final product.
It's like all the films, though, isn't it? All of them had this really different vibe to the trailers. That
absolutely, it's got a...
They set in motion that style that we get now, don't they? Where you got like the
100%.
Every trailer, whereas before it'd be like snippets of the film with.
Yeah. At work, we've produced cinematic trailers for the game we work on, and after I joined the company, they told me that the Dark of the Moon trailer was a big inspiration for one of our biggest game trailers, like especially the movie style and the like that.
Yeah.
I remember that
trailer. I remember very well. I remember that trailer very well. That that noise. That is and that was copied hugely by tons of film trailers. It's weird how influential film trailers are on other trailers and things like that. And actually, Transformers as a franchise, the films have become quite well known at copying other things, Star Wars and stuff like that. And there's a lot of, particularly in The Last Night, you can see it wears its influences so clearly in what it's trying to do. But actually, back in 2007, it did sort of change a lot of things itself, which was quite weird. Although I say that, it was copying other stuff even then, things like the score and stuff like that was, you can see the influence from other stuff that was happening. But it still did feel different. I think that first trailer is just so weird and creepy. And, the fact that there's no real music to it, just kind of this noise that kind of keeps repeating through it, this kind of chilling, almost.
Yeah, with the Scorponok tail that comes behind. Lennox. Yeah, I remember
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
The one thing I will say about the 2007 film, and we'll get into it, is that the sound of it is phenomenal. I think it's a very it's heavy, like it's exhausting, but it's the production value in the sound is really good, and I think you see that in that first trailer. And they put a lot of emphasis on they even do the whole thing of the only clue we have is this sound and all of that, and it really kind of sets this like super alien-esque weird vibe that you're going to get with this film.
How did that tally with the rest of Transformers as you recognized it? And you could obviously see, like, the trailer wasn't completely representative of the movie we'd get, but the tone of it, did that excite you, or did it not tally up with what you wanted from a Transformers movie at that very early stage?
I mean, it was different, don't get me wrong. Like, it didn't feel necessarily like Transformers that I knew, but I liked it.
That was not a bad thing.
For sure. No, I didn't mind it being different at all. Like, actually, the bit that we're probably missing, and I'm sure we will talk about today as well, is that we'd already seen concept artwork at that point, so that online we'd already had designs for Optimus, Megatron, several of the characters leaked.
We'd seen the photos, hadn't we? Like, of the vehicles on like a tarmac.
Being hauled to a location. Yeah.
So we had,
but there was
had a fair amount of
released
info.
shot of.
Yeah, there was. We had a fair amount of info already, but the leaked concept artwork looked bad. Let's be honest. Like you can look at it now for what it was at the time or whatever, but the still images that had been leaked didn't do those designs much favor, really. They I can see why they were controversial, particularly Megatron, which went down like a sack of something not very. I can't really swear on the podcast, but it wasn't particularly a sack of potatoes. It went down like a wet thud. Yeah, exactly. Sack of pretender hats. I like that one, but it didn't go down well, and perhaps understandably, because it was so different from everything that people kind of expected it to be. But then actually, I think when the first trailer, just coming back to that, I think when that came out, certainly for me, I had not been convinced by all of the concept artwork. I've got to be honest, when I first saw some of it, I was like, what on earth is this? But then seeing those designs moving, suddenly I was like bought in. I was like, okay, actually this works.
Yep, absolutely.
I can get behind this. So that first trailer,
seeing him in motion was really important.
100%.
Yeah, because like you get that, you still get that now, don't you? Where people see leaked images of stuff beforehand, and then straight away they're like really anti it. Like, this isn't mine, this isn't this. But then once they see the show or the film, they're like, oh, that was actually really good. And it's like you have to see stuff in context.
I 100%.
It's the same with those, because some of that leaked concept art, and they didn't do themselves any favors, because there was a leaked image of one of the pre-designs for Optimus Prime where he looked a bit more G1, and so it felt, when you saw the one set for the movie, it was like, what have they done? Why have they then gone from this? And it was like you saw that drawing, and you're like, that looks better to my eyes. But then when you see it, I think you're like, oh, it works.
Do you remember how much fake material there was around at the time as well?
I was going to ask this. Do you remember that fake, like, Lucasfilm animatic of that car? It wasn't a Datsun, but it had that very G1 style, and it was leaked and everybody thought it was real.
There was a Sideswipe one as well. I remember
there was an Optimus Prime animatic as well, like a more traditional G1 style animatic, and I can't remember if that was real and actually something that they'd done or not, because I know they did consider the the flat nosed truck as at one point, but
it was somebody. I can remember I can't remember who it was, but I remember them talking about it, and I think they'd done it for like university or for something. It wasn't actually for the film, but people kept going, "Oh, this is it," and then it didn't look like.
I seem to recall
Citroen advert as well, which I think came out after the movie. Do you remember the Citroen C4 advert where the car is dancing? That was definitely after the movie, but so very, very much influenced, obviously, by the vibe at the time. But yes, you were talking about freeze framing those early trailers, and I do very much remember going through them frame by frame and looking at the TFW galleries of the frame by frame of each trailer to spot. I think Jazz was the one that really caught my eye early on, and the one I wanted to see more of. Like, what did he look like? I remember the poster of Jazz that came out, or poster size, like wallpaper that they were putting out, that he was like kneeling and like one leg outstretched and just sort of in the corner of the shot. Remember that promotional image really clearly, and I had it on my computer background for quite some time. So and I think there were people at the time who, even if they weren't massively into the designs, they were excited at the concept of having Transformers on the big screen. And I remember as a UK seller, there was someone at the time who said to me, he remembers the very first scene in the movie with Blackout transforming. He was like crying tears in the cinema. It was so emotional for him to see Transformers on the big screen. And I'm pretty sure this person never picked up a single movie toy at all. That wasn't the point. It was just seeing Transformers on the big screen. And that was really emotive and a big thing at the time. I felt we were collectively quite open-minded towards it because it was still so novel to have Transformers on the big screen.
Yeah, I agree with that, and that definitely tallies with my experience and just the overwhelming feeling of excitement. That was what it was from that first trailer landing. Not the teaser as well. Like, don't get me wrong, but even with the teaser, it was like, what is this? Because it was so it was kind of bizarre. For me, it was very much that first trailer that was like definitely right up to seeing it in the cinema, where I had a blast. I got to tell you, like I really, just to kind of get that out there. I loved it, seeing it in the cinema, and all of my friends did as well that we saw it with. And I think you're right. That and actually, the more people I speak to about it, just like tonight, that seems to be a very common experience. And so I find it weird sometimes where the feeling now is that actually there was this huge anti, backlash, and that all Transformers fans were anti the whole thing. That is not. For me, that is not reality. Like, there definitely was a very vocal part of a lot of focal fans that hated it and hated the concept artwork. The concept artwork was a very definite time before the trailer where it was a problem. Like, people had issues with the designs, things like that. But then from the trailer onwards, I think they really turned a lot of that around, and a lot of people got bought in quite quickly.
I think you have to remember as well, like back then, Twitter, Facebook was brand new, and not everybody had Facebook. Like, whereas now, when a film comes out, it's dissected by 1,000 people. You see everything, every possible opinion from every corner is thrown at you. But back then, it wasn't like that. I remember, I think Facebook was like the year before. Yeah, I was on Twitter then. I
joined Facebook in 2007. Absolutely right. I was on MySpace before Facebook.
Yeah, I think I just joined it in 2007 as well. And MySpace, but you didn't post on them in the same way you do Twitter. You weren't looking at your mobile phones every 5 seconds waiting for the latest trailer. You were literally taking the time out to go and find those things and looking at them and that way. And you might be on forums and stuff. I wasn't there.
Yeah,
it's not absorbed in the same way. And I think you get that definitely. Now. People look back at the film as if through that lens of how they would have reacted if it was now, when it would have been outrage of people going, this is not like any of the whatever they grew up with. But back then it wasn't. There was a bit of that. I'd seen some elements of it, but not.
There wasn't this,
because social media wasn't a thing.
I agree with you. There wasn't the same expectation in a funny way as well. Like, there was a certain amount of expectation. Of course, this was Transformers. You've got people that have been fans since 1984.
It was uncharted territory.
That's exactly right. And I think there wasn't the expectation that it was going to necessarily look a certain way or feel a certain way or what have you. There was an element of blank canvas to it. And yes, there were people that were disappointed that, it wasn't the right track for Optimus Prime, or that the characters didn't look exactly like they did, or that Megatron was Megatron, that had that face and everything. Of course, there was all of that. There was that disappointment built into it.
Like a recycling.
Yeah, like a drawer of scissors.
A walking cutlery drawer.
Exactly. But it was mixed in with a huge amount of just, I think, just general elation that this was happening as well. Do you know what I mean? And that as you said, M.A.S., that Transformers were going to be on the big screen. And I think there was actually a lot of willingness to look past nitpicks and things just because of it.
If you think about the animated series we'd had to that point, and then how does the transformation of real life vehicles translate to the big screen? And especially, like, licensed vehicles were a massive part of this movie, weren't they? The whole General Motors thing, and also the first movie to feature the F-22 Raptors from the US Army was a massive thing. So, I mean, I remember Starscream's role in those trailers. He almost got like all the best trailer clips. Like the bit where he comes and lands in the middle of the city, and the plane is just at this really weird angle, almost throws himself into the middle of the street. Or when he just he's hovering over Sam's head and he does that roll and then transforms and flies off. He had the killer scenes in the trailer, no question.
I think he did the trailers more than the film.
To a point, yeah. I mean, you almost saw all of his best parts in the trailer.
It's true.
So yeah, I mean, that was a big thing to see how they translated to a big screen. And I remember every single TV spot that came out, I would dissect. And I remember the lead up to the release of the movie, the TV spots were getting more and more frequent. One I particularly remember that I actually didn't find in the YouTube playlist that you sent with all the trailers and the TV spots was one where Blackout was in robot mode and just ran and transformed into his copter and tried to grab Sam, but he missed and then he flew off. That was one I was really looking forward to seeing again. And
I don't remember
because
that
it was
one.
bringing back, it brought back so many memories. I remember the MTV exclusive footage and all that stuff. I was digesting all of this in the lead up to the movie.
Are you username ladiesman217?
I don't know what you're talking about.
Are you username ladiesman217?
When we first suggested this episode topic, I remember I was far from enthusiastic. I was like, oh my God, do you guys really want me to watch that movie again? And I think it's because of everything the movies became and my feelings towards it since. But as soon as I started watching those trailers this week, and then I watched the movie a couple of nights ago, I was just right back there with that enthusiasm and that love and all the memories which just came flooding back of how big I was into this at the time and so excited for this movie. It's like it's the only thing that mattered.
Yeah, I think, and I know at the risk of sounding like a broken record and being all like, oh, you know, back in the day and all of that, it's probably hard to appreciate now the level of excitement that was there at the time because it's become, you know, again, you know, Twitter, all of that, the discourse around it, it's become the sort of de facto thing, hasn't it, to be a bit about the idea of a new Transformers movie. I mean, look at what's going on with Rise of the Beast now. People are so cynical about it. And yeah, there's still a lot of excitement, of course there is, but a lot of people's, you know, automatic reaction is, oh, well, they're going to cock this up then, you know, and a lot of the details that are coming out, you know, are picked apart and whatever.
Cynicism is very much a part of these films now, isn't
absolutely. And I get it because, you know, we've had, 14 of these films now? I've lost count. You know, I know there's not that many, but you know,
it's the 8th one. I think no.
Well,
with the 7th one.
Is this not
this is
7?
Yeah, this is 7
right.
with Bumblebee. And I understand this isn't cynicism to a degree because, you know, The Last Night was not good, and I mean, there've been really a case of diminishing returns for some time in terms of the kind of quality of them or whatever. I don't think I'm being too controversial in saying that, you know, and of course there are people that like them, every film, you know, and whatever, but I think even general audiences have been somewhat turned off by them. You know, I mean, there's no way, I mean, just coming back to, you know, our wives and girlfriends, there's no way that my wife feels the same about any of the other films as she does about 2007. You know, that was the one that she enjoyed, but you know, I didn't even bother suggesting let's go and see the last one, you know, The Last Night. She did love Bumblebee though. She really enjoyed that. But I think
that's funny. Like my wife came with me to Revenge of the Fallen, and it was that thing you guys talked about, which was halfway through the movie you kind of realized I'm actually not enjoying this. But then she came with me to Dark of the Moon as well, and I don't know what it was, but we both really, really enjoyed seeing Dark of the Moon together, and we saw it in 3D as well, and we had a great time that day. But yeah, I wouldn't expect her to want to come to any subsequent versions of the movies.
See, Dark of the Moon, I had the same thing halfway through. It was actually during the big battle. It was in like the final act or whatever. I remember she was yawning, and I remember us speaking, and me being like, "This is actually not so good, is it?" And she was just kind of like, you know, and she just checked out by that point. It was just too much.
See, me and Emily have watched them all together, and we loved the first one, and we both have really disliked every one of the sequels. And each time we watched it, we're like, God, this is so bad. Until we got to Bumblebee, and when we came out of the cinema, we were both like, wow, that was amazing. But the exact same reaction, like it felt a lot like seeing the first one again in so many ways. There was that sort of, because I think what the first one has, like, or what Sixo was almost touching on there, is there's like a sense of wonder
magic
with the first one.
Genuine movie magic.
Because it's before you knew what the movies looked like, and there was not 5 films of and 14,000 toys, whatever. It was all uncharted territory. You didn't know what was coming next. You didn't know what it was going to look like, how things were going to sound. You didn't even know how Peter Cullen was really going to sound, because you'd literally just hear his voice in a trailer, but you're like, what is he going to sound like on the film? And there's sort of stuff like that. And you don't get the like 100,000 clips of people comparing him to the cartoon. You didn't get that then. It was like, oh wow, he's back, and they're like,
that was a huge thing, Peter Cullen coming back, and it was massive. It wasn't a given at all. I remember there was disappointment that Frank Welker wasn't in the final thing, and that they got Hugo Weaving, because they'd even talked about getting Welker in to do it, hadn't they? I
Mhm.
think there was actually test footage of him doing some of the lines and
Right.
things.
Just didn't work out, I guess.
They didn't like the voice. I think they decided he didn't sound
Mm.
menacing enough, which I think is a shame, and I thought Hugo Weaving sounded great, actually, in the
He
film.
was great. He
but
actually was, yeah.
I think I can understand why people were maybe a little bit perturbed by some of those decisions as well, but it is what it is. But the other thing I was going to say, actually, before I forget it, is that I think that you're absolutely right, Liam. I think it had all of that kind of, not pre-standing knowledge about it going for it, that was in its core, in its favor. But the other thing I would say about the 2007 film is that although it has elements of stuff that would become less desirable in later films, there are elements of it, if you're being critical about it, that are there, that you can see the threads of what would come later on that people don't like about these films, of course, but it has a lot less of it. Like it has, we'll get into some of the specifics, I'm sure, as we go through, but like the action scenes feel less chaotic than they do in later films. The storyline, such as it is more coherent, I think, than later films.
That's funny you should say that, because I remember coming out of that first movie and thinking I almost couldn't track what was happening in some of the robotic battles. But as you say, that evolved further on down the line.
That's the thing. There are criticisms that you can level at that first film and say, well, it's this and it's that and the other, but that all of those things are magnified the further down the franchise that you go, I think, to the point where, for me, the Last Night, I remember us talking about it at the time, saying, what was that film about? And I'm like, even coming out the cinema in the pub afterwards, I was like, I just don't know. I don't know.
I was asking you about work during the movie, wasn't I?
Yeah, you were.
Didn't I just turn to you halfway through the film and say, so how's work, man?
You did. You were trying to, you were striking up a conversation, because it was just,
I think we've
that guy.
I think we spoke about this before, though, but I always say, like, it feels like the makers of the first movie took the wrong lessons from the first movie. Like, people laughing at the dog weeing on Ironhide. It's funny in that film. And then it feels like in the second film, they decided they had to ratchet that up to 1,000. And so it focuses on so many of those little things that are funny in isolation in the first movie. And then it's like it injects them with steroids for the following one. And it's like, the parents, like stuff like that.
But don't you find that watching the movie now? Don't you find, like, intrusive. On a rewatch of the 2007 movie, doesn't every comedic scene or every character seem like a caricature of themselves now? And they just, like, everything was wound up to 10. Like, all the scenes which, like, Sam being in the police station and being asked if he was on drugs, or
Judd Nelson.
Just all that stuff just...
That's Judd Nelson, though, isn't it?
Is it Judd Nelson?
That's Judd Nelson.
I'd completely forgotten that. I think you're right, but I'd completely forgotten.
When he asked him if he's on drugs with a gun, he's like, take the gun.
But I can't believe I've come this far and not known that.
This is where someone's going, no, it ain't. I'm sure that's Judd Nelson. I'm pretty certain that's why he's there.
Check it
I thought he was in that
confirm.
film. Yeah.
I'm a piece 50 cent. I remember that, yeah.
but you're right. A lot of the humour was dialed up to 11, and some of it now, when you see it now, it is a bit questionable. Do you know what I mean? There are elements of it that are like, ooh, I mean, there's a definite bit where it's like, well, hang on, why are we talking about masturbation in a Transformers film, and stuff like that?
I remember laughing.
Happy time.
I remember laughing in the cinema.
I did laugh.
But that's because it's not relentless. Like in Revenge of the Fallen, it feels like the parents get like 2 hours of the film because the film feels like it's 14 hours long. But they must have 15 different plots going on, and you're like, why are they still here? Whereas in this film, they don't feel as intrusive because they feel like they're only there for certain bits. And watching it back again, I didn't feel like I do when I see them in the later films. Again, I still found it quite funny, and it's this humor doesn't appeal to me as much now, but it's not as offensive.
I agree with you on that. I guess that was my point, is that there's still stuff that doesn't work in 2007, but it's less noticeable than it would become. So, like, for example, I mean, if you think about, I was thinking about this film earlier and kind of making some notes and stuff. And if you look at it, there are like several stories worth of stuff, even in 2007. I mean, I've often said, about The Last Night, especially, that it's like just so overstuffed of things, too many things in one film. And like, boil it down, what would have made a good storyline? There is tons of, for as bad as the final product is, there's tons of good stuff in The Last Night, tons of great ideas, just too many of them all stuffed in. Whereas in 2007, there is too much, but it's not as noticeable and as egregious as it is in later films. So, for example, you've got all of the stuff with Sam, of course, and Michaela, and the glasses, and all of that. You've got all of the stuff with the like frenzy and the hacking, and you've got the
Trish Walker from Jessica Jones. I didn't clock that till I was watching it. I was like, oh my god.
Yeah.
I bet she was in Neighbours. There's no way that with that accent.
I think she's quite famous in Australia. I think, but
is this, Rachel Taylor.
Yeah.
Oh, is that a name?
That's
the analyst.
Yeah. So this,
everyone from Australia has been in Neighbours or Home and Away, haven't they?
But there's her whole storyline that leads to the police station and the donut scene and all of that. There's that whole storyline. Then you've got the whole thing with the army running away from Scorponok and that scene in the desert and all of that. And all of this really doesn't hang together. Like, and I'm saying it loosely, but it's not necessarily one coherent storyline.
Day and night doesn't hang together in a lot of those scenes.
Right.
It's like, wait, isn't it sunny outside? Why is it like sundown now? No, wait, the sun's back.
The blackout.
Yeah, well, that was even in the first scene, wasn't it? In blackout.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But come on, I think we're really getting ahead of ourselves because we've got to talk about the first opening scene of that movie, and the whole blackout base attack. When you saw that in its full glory in the cinema, was that not just like, this is my dream realized? Transformers on the big screen, and just look at the destruction that this Transformer is wreaking across this base. Wasn't that astonishing? And the score was brilliant for that first opening segment. I absolutely loved it. Still gives me tingles. When I watched it the other day, it was still spine tingling.
My girlfriend always tells the story of, because we went to see it a week before it came out. It was an advanced preview at our local cinema. And so me and my housemate and my girlfriend at the time, I have this record with Transformers movies where I end up seeing them weeks before they come out. But we were like the only people in the cinema because nobody else must have realized it was on. So we were sat alone. There was just us three in the middle of the cinema a week before the film came out. And she sat in the middle of us and she said and my housemate was a bouncer, so he's a big bloke as well. And she said she just turned around and looked at our faces as that's unfolding, that scene. And she's like, and we're both just there with our mouths like wide open, like, oh my God.
It was
and
that
was the second I heard that transformation noise, the first one, when it goes, instantly it's like, whoa. Yeah. And then it just looked incredible.
And that soundscape, just for that scene, like his sonic charges or whatever it is that he was firing, just everything about the sounds in that scene were superb. And you were speaking of seeing it early. I was lucky.
It felt epic.
It did. And obviously we'd had like little teasers of that scene in the trailers as well. So you kind of knew what was coming, but it was still so grand when you saw it. And that's how you start a movie, man. That was, it was great. Yeah. But obviously then it started actually with all of the military chatter and the caricatures who were in the military transport before they got to the base. But I was going to say, I was lucky enough to see the movie with Transformers fans the first time. Because I first saw it in the UK at the UK premiere in Leicester Square. I think it was at the Empire as well, which is Empire Leicester Square was a great place to see movies. And Michael Bay was there, and Megan Fox was there, Shia LaBeouf was there, Josh Duhamel was there, and they handed out all of the attendees. They got a printed script of the movie, and I still have that kicking around somewhere.
That's cool.
So they did like a little talk before the start of the movie at the front of where the screen was. So that was incredible. I got to thank the Mapes twins for getting us tickets to that. That was amazing. And then I got to see it in the US at the US premiere at BotCon 2007, and Tyrese Gibson and Rachel Taylor were there. I remember just being a little bit starstruck and not going up and saying anything to them. They were right there in front of me. Would have loved to have gotten a picture. But yeah.
You mean you didn't go elbow and go, hey up, left cheek, left cheek, where's your wallet, lad?
I certainly didn't. But yeah, so I got to see it both times with fans, and the reaction in the cinema to scene after scene. I mean, there was cheering in the cinema. There was like, yes! When he transforms and he starts shooting. It was basically that throughout the entire movie. And it was an amazing vibe. And it started with that super powerful, great first scene.
See, I saw it not at any kind of I just saw it in a normal cinema with mates, with, as I say, with my girlfriend at the time and friends. And it was packed. I mean, it was a full cinema. But it was a similar vibe. People loved it. There was I recall a ton of laughter. There was laughter throughout. All of the scenes now that you would pick apart and go, well, this is not funny because of that or whatever. People were laughing in the cinema. That's all I can say. And but I also remember, similar to you, Liam, saying that your girlfriend looking at your faces and being kind of open mouthed. I remember the scene is towards the end, but where Starscream is hopping on the different jets, in midair and taking them out.
Oh, what a scene!
The scene,
Fantastic
scene.
scene.
It's just incredible.
Yes.
I remember turning to my friend. I think my then girlfriend was on my left. His then girlfriend, now wife, was then in between the two of us, and then it was him. I remember the two of us turned and looked at each other, and our eyes clocked, and both of us were just like mouths agape, just like, oh my God, what are we watching? Because it was just, we were both.
And that's quite far into the movie, so at that point, it's still not worn off, has it? It's like, oh my, this is Transformers properly realised. This is what I expected it to be. That's what a disguise is,
Absolutely. And, coming back to that opening scene, it's funny, actually, how, I can't believe I'm going to use this word in reference to a Transformers movie, how restrained it is at times, particularly in comparison to later films. It's not a restrained film. Of course it's not. It's bombastic and it's big and it's, all of those things. But think about it. The opening scene is one Transformer, one robot, and it's impressive and it's massive and it's an incredible scene, but that's it. And you don't see that much of it. A lot of the shots are quick close-ups or they're very far away, and you just see it as kind of a glimpse, as it's walking past a window.
And you miss loads in the first watch.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. Even the transformation, they cut it up a little bit, and they don't show you too much right in your face, which is really good. And then they kind of really build it to the point where when the Autobots arrive, you're quite far into the film by that point. There's been a fair old bit that's happened, and you're ready for those Autobots. But even then, I think by the time it gets to that final downtown battle, and the Decepticons are there and everything. I remember the Decepticons mobilizing. And even then, the start of those scenes, it's Bone Crusher, just kind of like, in solitary conflict with Optimus. You're not yet in the full throes of it. By the time the Decepticons are mobilizing and it all kicks off, you weren't exhausted by that point. You didn't have that feeling of like, is this still going? Because it was exciting.
But you were always left wanting more, because we had that Bone Crusher busting through that coach in trailers, and then his scene is over so quickly. And I that was definitely an aspect of the movie. I was like, oh, but they were in it
and
so
it was shocking.
briefly.
Yeah. See, Optimus Prime chopped someone up. It was so. It's not something you've ever seen. Right. It was so out of left field for the character. And I remember, like I was saying there, the first time I went to see it, we were the only people in the cinema. So, and because it was a week before, there were no reviews. There was nothing. So we literally had no idea. And because there's no one else in there, it was empty, and it was amazing because it just got to focus on the film. But I went a couple times afterwards, but a load of people from work wanted to go and see it as well. So we all went in a group. And I remember then when we came out, half of them were like, I have no idea what happened. And the other half were like, that was amazing. But because I was watching it again, the amount of stuff I picked up on that I hadn't spotted before, like there's that scene when what's his face? Helicopter Mush. Blackout?
Helicopter Mush is fine.
He's in the streets in the downtown, and he's walking down, and they're like pointing guns. But it was only the second time I noticed that his blades are spinning against the wall as he's going, because there's so much to take in, and it's like wow. And each time you see something different that you hadn't spotted before, and it was just incredible. That film. That bit when Starscream dives down into the street and skids and shoots, but he does a thing, and he does this like we were talking about earlier. We touched on it, but the way he moves in that film is incredible, because every scene he's like quick little attacks, and he skids about, and then he leaps off and shoots away, and he's like, because he's a coward, isn't he, and a traitor and stuff, and it really plays into that when you know that about the character. It's almost like they're dangling you in for people who know Starscream. And even again, watch it tonight, I was just in awe of seeing that. And it's like, people often say CGI has aged badly or stuff for films, but just watching this, I was in it as he's leaping on the backs of those jets, and I was like, man, why didn't we get more of this?
I don't think the visuals have aged badly from that movie of the robots.
It moves too quick as well for you really to focus on.
I 100% agree. The one thing I will say is that, and we've already kind of hinted at it, but the first scene of Bumblebee fighting Barricade, I remember thinking, I have no clue what's going on. I mean, it was great, like I loved it, but I remember distinctly thinking, who is who and what is what, and one of them was yellow and one of them was black, and I still couldn't, I still couldn't distinguish between who was who at that point.
But the U's playing,
it was an insane scene.
Emo was big at the time,
but again, that was something that it was a critique that I know people had of that film at that time, but it was somehow heightened and worsened in later films. It became more of a caricature of those films from sort of Revenge of the Fallen onwards, of like, oh, of course you can't distinguish which any of the characters are. Whereas at the time it was
It's very Jason Bourne.
yeah, exactly. There was a kind of Jason Bourne vibe to the fight scenes and that kind of frenetic style to it and everything, for sure. But it's just interesting that still there was that kind of willingness to forgive a lot of that stuff at the time.
Hey, what you want? Pocket! Which pocket? My black pocket! Left cheek! Left cheek! Left cheek!
Speaking of things you can't forgive, I went to see this movie probably 9 times in the cinema in total, and then watched it multiple times since. I mean, I don't think I've ever watched a movie more than this, maybe only the 86 movie. But there's one scene which it didn't matter who I had gone to see the movie with, they always turned to me and gave me a funny look every time. It goes, hey, how did you like that? How did you like? Can you guess what line it is?
Is it the lubricating scene?
No.
Is it Bubble P?
No, it's when the analysts are first gathered together and the one with the mop head walks over and goes, I've just been spying on that group over there. They think it's Iranians. And the other guy goes, no, this is far too smart for Iranian scientists. And every time in that movie, someone would turn around and go, how'd you like that? How'd you like that? I didn't actually. I didn't like that.
Yeah, no, of course.
But that was one of the criticisms. Like, the movie had these things that probably don't age well. It had like quips like that and caricatures and things.
It's very pro-America, isn't it? Where by popping at other countries.
There was so much pro-US military in that movie. It was almost overwhelming.
Well, they needed it to be, wouldn't it? They needed it to because the movie were essentially funding a lot of it. There was a whole thing. That was why they did it on the budget that they did it. I mean, it's funny to me now because a lot of people talk about Transformers 2007 like it was some sort of low budget indie blockbuster, and it wasn't at all. Like, it was a huge budget film, big budget film. It's just that comparative to some other big budget films, it wasn't quite at the same peak of it. No. But it was still huge. But part of the way they kept the cost down was getting the military involved, quite simply, and General Motors as well, of course. Huge amounts of product placement and whatever. But the military,
it became military porn.
It really was.
That became a phrase that was often associated from that movie.
Propaganda.
Really,
and it's funny when people, sometimes now you get people saying, "Oh, I don't like my fiction, Transformers, whatever type of fiction, to be political." I'm sorry, that film is hugely political in the way that it portrays the American military and everything that's going on. It's massively so. And as you said, Maz, there's some real questionable stuff in there as well that has not aged well, unfortunately.
There's a weird thing throughout the film. I only noticed it on this time watching it, where lots of characters seem to threaten to beat up old ladies. I don't know if either of you noticed this. Bobby Bolivia.
Yep.
In the car lot, and he's like shouting at that woman, he's like going to hit her. And then again later, when they go to the hacker guy's house, Anthony Anderson, he's like start shouting about like trying to hit his grandma, and I was like, oh my god, there's a lot of threats to hit really old women in this. But that bit when that guy fell in the swimming pool made me laugh really loud again tonight. It's the way he does it.
Yeah, the glass.
That's the one.
It's the glass.
But it's funny, like I have to tell you, like on 13th viewing, it's not as funny, obviously. But I remember,
it never will be.
Super funny at the time. Everyone laughed.
Yeah. Yeah, it was raucous.
That's what I mean about dialing it all up so high. Like the way he was towards his grandma. You playing those damn video games again? And then also Bobby Bolivia. Like the Bobby Bolivia scene has some nice lines in it. It's got some cool parts, but part of it is also a little bit cringe now. Watching it in hindsight, it's just dialed up too much. Even though the lines are almost like hallowed Transformers lines now, especially when they were used in the Bumblebee trailer as well, which really got me actually.
The bit about
when they say everything's more than meets the eye about 45 times.
That did come up a couple of times. That's true.
It's the line, isn't it?
I think it's more than meets the eye to you, Michaela.
Cars don't pick the drivers. Drivers don't pick the cars. Cars pick the drivers. That's the line, isn't it? That's the one. So
there's one great line in there that I actually picked up on this time, and I actually. Because these movies, like we're saying there, they have a lot of very silly lines, and it's very rah-rah America talk. But there's one line when Bumblebee turns into a car and Sam's trying to get Michaela to go. He said something like, 50 years from now, when you look back at your life, don't you want to say you got in the car? And as someone now who's thinking of leaving the job and going to university and stuff like that, that really actually struck a chord with me tonight. And I was like, wow, that's actually quite profound. And you don't think of that from the Transformers films. It really, really struck a note.
Well, that whole Bumblebee talking through the radio thing has become so hackneyed now, it annoys people. But in that scene with the music, when he was there talking to them for the first time, and then she says, are you some kind of alien? And he just, he winks at her and points and then just turns into the car in front of them. That still gives me tingles. That was beautifully constructed scene. I love it.
Again, I kind of feel like I'm sort of keep making this point, but again, for me, it's just one of those where they did it in 2007 and it worked, and then they dialed it up and kept doing it, for future things, and it became annoying, and it became to the point where it was like, stop with the radio thing. Like, we get it, it's been done. And they were doing it in Transformers Prime and other stuff as well, and it was kind of like, ugh. Back in 2007, it worked, and it was fun. And I think it's like a lot of that. The humor is such of that as well, where actually you could look at it now and think, wow, some of the humor in that is a bit on the fringe or whatever. But then it's dialed up again in later films, and it gets beyond, not even borderline. I was going to say some of it is just outright bad taste, not good, Whereas actually in that film, it was still kind of, certainly at the time anyway, it kind of felt like it worked. So it's just fascinating.
Simmons is really creepy. The stuff he keeps saying to Michaela, it's constantly saying like, you're a criminal. Criminals are hard. It sounds like Vince McMahon.
Yeah, he doesn't age well in that movie.
But even when I remember watching the film, one of the things I disliked was him, because it felt like he'd come in from somewhere else, like this completely over the top, and you're like looking at all the other characters, and you're like, don't they notice this guy and how strange? It doesn't make any sense. It's almost too over the top.
I think that's what I was
for a film that's really over the top.
I was sort of saying earlier. You've got all of these elements in this film, and again, it's worse in later films. Of course, it is. But even in this film, there are so many elements that actually you could have lost a few, and it would have been fine. And I think Simmons and that whole thread is one that could have gone. Really, do you know what I mean? It wouldn't have been the end of the world. I actually think some of the hacking stuff could have gone as well. Do you know what I mean? And it wouldn't have. I mean, it's still a long film. It's still well over 2 hours. This film.
It is a super long film. Yep.
It's not as long as later films in the franchise, but it's still long. That's the thing. So,
one of the other things I found was actually dialed back in this one, and that's caught me off guard. Actually, was how in the films how long they focus on Michaela, Megan Fox. A lot of it's very gratuitous, but in the first film, there's some of it. But I actually was struck by how minimal it was compared to what we came to see in the second and the third one, where it's like you're just watching a music video over and over again.
I actually agree with that. It's the camera work in the first one I'll talk about in a minute, but the second one is just beyond gratuitous. The third one is even worse in that regard, with Carly. It's just like it's almost like a caricature or a parody, it's like what you would film to take the mickey out of that kind of thing. It's just really something. But 2007, what's really fascinating for me about 2007 is Michaela, actually, because fascinating character. And it's weird how people write off the character of Michaela Baines and say, oh, she's useless or she's, just there as eye candy or whatever, because actually she's one of the most intelligent and
she's the doer.
Yeah, she's the doer. She's really the protagonist of the film. Do you know what I mean? Take Sam out of it, and you could have the film with her, and she would be your character. She's the one with the biggest arc. She has more development in the film than Sam by a country mile. She's more capable than Sam. Very often it's Sam that gets into situations like he's being attacked by Frenzy, and she's the one that comes along with the chainsaw or whatever and saves him. She's the capable one. She's the one that in the battle teams up with Bumblebee and sorts it all out, and she has
you drive
out. Yeah, exactly. And she has this kind of redemption arc where she learns to, because she's talking at the start about how people don't accept her, and a lot of guys are intimidated by her because she knows about cars. She knows about cars. Sam doesn't. I mean, that's like another thing. But there's all of these elements about her, and she goes on a bit of a journey. And I think what's unfortunate is that actually there's some really clever stuff in the script that isn't matched by the camera work. It's not congruent. So like in that scene where she's looking under Bumblebee's bonnet, and she's talking about how she likes to work on cars. If you just listen to the words that she's saying, but not look at the camera work, it's all there. It's all talking. Yeah. There's quite an intelligent character in that, that's really well written. It's talking about how, all of that stuff, how she's not taken seriously and what have you. It's just unfortunate that then the camera work that they choose focuses on her body and kind of sexualizes her.
Yeah, or the fact that Sam is not paying attention at all and
Right.
is mincing his words and all the rest of it. Yeah,
Exactly.
He's very pervy.
It's
in this
hugely
movie.
pervy, and it's just
it's
weird.
just again that whole dialed up situation, and like this probably wouldn't go down this way in real life, but we are winding it up to make entertainment and to appeal to this group of people. Yeah, there's a lot of that.
There are really odd things in it like that. Like when they're in the car together and they're in the tunnel, and he says, "Why don't you come and sit on my knee in the front of the car?" And you're like, "Why? What?
Yeah.
How did she just go? Oh yeah, that makes sense because there's a seatbelt." And you're like, "What?" It's such a weird. There's a lot of stuff like that in the Transformers, where there's these weird little moments that suddenly just pull you out of it for a second. You're like,
it's almost
what?
like they crafted this actually relatively, competent, capable female protagonist, and then they thought, "Hang on, this is not going to resonate with presumably our target audience, teenage boys," and they stuck in the Sam Witwicky character to kind of be relatable or whatever, and made him a complete hapless schmuck. And it's like wish fulfillment at that point. Do you know what I mean? And it's just really interesting. And there's been tons written about this before and whatever. But I think what's fascinating is that people get really critical of Megan Fox in that film and critical of the character, but actually the character is fine. Really, really, if anything, for 2007, one of the sort of it's not the derogatory portrayal that you might think it is. Do you know what I mean? That's the camera work is just what kind of portrays that.
No, and neither was Rachel Taylor. Rachel Taylor's character was far
true.
from helpless as well. She helped drive certain elements of the overall story as well.
Are you Samuel James Witwicky, descendant of Archibald Witwicky?
Yeah?
My name is Optimus Prime.
Having seen the movie, I remember my reaction when I saw it the first time. I was completely blown away, and I wanted much, much more from it. Like, I couldn't wait for the next installment. I stayed through the credits and saw the Starscream scene. To this day, I still don't know what he says. I remember feeling, I think, genuine heartbreak that Jazz died, because I loved Jazz in that film, and I thought he was the slickest looking of all of them. I loved every little nod that they gave for Transformers fans. And I don't know if people realize how many nods they actually did give for the fandom. For example, looking back now, you may not understand that all those little jokes about eBay were probably a reference to Transformers fans, because, once upon a time, that was massively part of the community, was buying toys on eBay was a big deal and very commonly spoken about in the fandom. So every time they spoke about eBay, it was like a little nod, and everyone kind of giggled in the cinema. I remember that as Transformers fans.
I've got one question, though. Why didn't they just bid on the glasses?
Snipe bidding.
Right? Why didn't they just... Geeks and that stuff. Come on. Do you know what I mean? It's just absolutely ridiculous that they go off on this big plot to find these glasses and whatever. Just bid on them.
It's probably two-factor authentication. I know.
And Optimus, but Optimus shows later he is very impatient, doesn't he? Like when they're looking from the room, every 30 seconds he's popping his head in the window, going, "Hey, mate, you found him yet?"
I kind of like the idea that there's an alternate storyline here somewhere where you've got the Autobots and the Decepticons in a bidding war on eBay, and that's the,
our world, their war. Click, click, click.
Have you sent this yet, Ratchet?
Please,
can you make sure these are
packaged? Leave positive feedback. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Those glasses, that scene actually flags up something. I'm just going to quickly mention here in case I forget. Is when I was watching it tonight, there's a bit like Optimus tells the story of what happened to Megatron, but he follows it up straight away with when he goes, "Oh, how did you find about the glasses?" He goes, "eBay." How does he know that story?
Yeah. Good question.
World Wide Web.
Yeah.
But he tells Sam the story, and then tells Sam he only discovered the existence of the glasses because he saw them when he was scrolling through eBay. It's like, how does he know the story of what happened to Megatron and Sam's great granddad?
Don't think about it too much.
Yeah, I think that was the key. But speaking of nods to fans,
continuity.
Let's
what does the TF Wiki say about this?
Talk about intra-film continuity, shall we? Let's just not mention that. But
no.
Do you remember the scene of Jazz jumping onto his hands and transforming?
Yeah, sure.
That was beautiful. So that was another nod to collectors and Transformers fans. I actually was going to say there was one scene that made me laugh again on this final rewatch I did the other day, years later, and that was when he looks out of the window at his parents' house and they've all transformed to car mode, just sitting on his lawn like that. That still made me laugh. I was like, no, that's not hiding. I still thought that was funny.
It's a funny
some
scene.
of them, some of those scenes have.
It's very deadpan. It's well done.
And the use of the music when he's chasing Michaela for the first time, just like Drive by the Cars and Baby Come Back, and all the songs that Bumblebee plays. I felt like I'd hate to compare it to a film that's so much better thought of, like Guardians of the Galaxy, but just the use of music like that in scenes like that, it was a really nice touch. It felt like a really cool touch at the time. And
do you know what I think what you've hit on with both of those scenes, the hiding scene in the garden, which is, I think, still quite funny, and the music and stuff. There's a kind of almost I say in relative terms, like an innocence with some of that film that isn't there in the later ones, and the kind of humor that's employed. Like the hiding scene is a perfect example because it comes out of the moment. It's actually kind of genuinely funny. In a kind of sweet way, that actually a lot of the humor in later films is more crass and more like people insulting each other or shouting in their faces or whatever. And I don't think you have as much of that in the 2007 film. And I think a lot of this is probably Spielberg's influence, to be honest. I know that when the film was developed, I know that he was the one that was pushing for this angle of a boy in his car. That all came from Spielberg, and it's very Spielbergian anyway, of course. But, I think a lot of the sort of Bayisms, as it were, are kind of a bit tempered in that first film, and the kind of all-out Bayhem, I think it's the phrase. It's a little bit muted in some senses. It's still there, obviously, but it's mixed in with some actual genuine heart. And I think you have it in those scenes that you're describing, Maz, where actually that influence is not there so much, particularly in the later films, and it's just kind of gone by that point. And I think what you get is in later films, none of the characters are really likable. I mean, are there any likable characters in Age of Extinction? I cannot think of one.
Are there any characters?
Well, yeah, but they're kind of caricatures, if anything. Cade Yeager or what have you. These are not. Yeah. He's not a likable person. Nothing about he's like threatening and violent, and yes, he's got qualities that you could say, like he wants to protect his family, but he's not actually doing that in what he's doing. So anyway, it's a whole other topic. Yeah. But actually, you do have likable characters in the first film, and you do have sweet moments. They're not abundant through the whole story, but they're there.
No.
And I think that makes a big difference.
Yeah. The first film does feel like it's still not targeted at younger kids, but it's still on a platform of being a kids franchise almost. It's older kids, whereas like Revenge of the Fallen onwards, it seems like it's very much targeted at older kids, teenagers more, doesn't it? It's got that kind of way more explosions, way more crass humor. Whereas the first one's still, like you were saying about it, the Spielberg influence, it's got that almost 80s film vibe where it goes from one point to another, and there's almost like an era of innocence. And there are crash jokes, but not in the same way. Like I say, the second one feels like they targeted a different crowd, almost like the kids that grew up with the first one.
Yeah, there was a lot more ethnic caricatures in the movies as they got on subsequently as well. They played a lot on that vibe as well. And it does exist in the first movie, but it's definitely toned up again in the subsequent films.
It's exactly what we keep saying. All the elements were there, but they're just dialed up in later films. Whereas there's almost a kind of slight feeling of restraint in 2007, and it works better for it.
Did you then, the two of you, and I know I mentioned this a little earlier, but so did you two walk out of the cinema wanting more after you saw that movie?
Yeah, I was gutted that I'd actually seen it a week early because I couldn't then go back. Because like when I saw Batman Begins, I watched it at midnight and I enjoyed it so much, I got straight back up the next morning and went back and watched it again. And I really want to do that with this, but at that time, there was hardly anything about it. So it wasn't like you could talk to people who had seen it and you couldn't go back and watch it. I even looked on the Pirate Bay to see if a version had leaked so I could watch it again. And it hadn't, obviously, because it wasn't out. And so it was actually really frustrating because we came out and we were all like, oh my God, that was amazing. This was the greatest thing I've ever seen. I need to see it again. It was so pumped up. Then there was this realization. It's like, oh God, I've got to wait at least a week.
Yeah,
First world problems with watching premieres, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I really wanted to. I really wanted to see it again as well. I did go and see it. I can't remember how many times I saw it at the cinema, but it's definitely more than once for sure.
I took everyone who wanted to go. Anyone who was interested in going, I went with them again.
But that was the thing. There was this whole atmosphere of people you knew who wanted to see it because they were like, "Oh, it's Transformers." I remember that from being a kid, and they didn't know what it was going to be. They were like, whether they came out and loved it or hated it, there was before they'd seen it, there was this very excited atmosphere to it. Everybody was interested. Like, oh, you've seen it. What's it like? What's Optimus Prime like?
I think I took my mum. Now I'm thinking about it. I'm pretty sure I took my mum to see it. Yes.
That's so nice. What a good
I'm
point.
almost certain I took my mum to see it. Finchley Road, O2 Centre in London. I'm pretty sure I took her to see it. I'll have to check.
Brilliant.
I'll ask her.
But did you both find that you came out of it, like we were just saying there, like really energized? Because like that time I was picking up Transformers, but I wasn't really in a fandom or doing much. I was just picking up the odd, like the classics toys and the occasional reissue, almost like on the outskirts. But when I came out of that, I felt so positive, and it was like almost like being reborn as a Transformer.
Absolutely.
Like,
yeah. When I came out of the UK premiere, they had that thing where someone with a mic comes up to you at the end, just like for the TV adverts, they record your reaction to it. And I was with one of my friends, and they were just asking us about the movie, and we were like crazy buzzed about it. But I think other people must have been more buzzed or more interesting because we didn't end up on the advert. That will lead nicely into talking about the designs and how toys came out and how we sort of went from loving the movie to almost doing what we do as toy collectors after it. Did you come out energized after the movie?
Oh yeah, no, for sure. Absolutely, I did. Absolutely. I think it was... I wasn't like collecting tons at the time, just Masterpiece, bits and bobs. But yeah, definitely great feeling afterwards. Absolutely loved it. And as I say, did want to go and see it again, did want to see more. Had a great feeling for the film in general. And I think, I was going to say as well that what is interesting to me now is that actually critically, it wasn't overwhelmingly positive, but it wasn't completely awful either. It had, it was mixed to maybe, but there was a lot of positive reviews of that film. I mean, I remember at the time I was reading Empire magazine a lot and stuff like that, and they liked it. I think it was a 4-star review from memory, and.
Paul Ross probably called it the greatest film of all time.
Is that right?
If you remember Paul Ross, do you remember Paul Ross? Like, it was always like the paid critic who loved like the worst films ever made. It's like 10 out of 10. You're right.
I do remember that.
Blair Witch Project 9.
I do remember that. Yeah. But no, it was. I mean, it certainly had its share of drubbings, but it wasn't the overwhelming voice at all, and there wasn't this exhaustion that there is now. With the Transformers franchise at all. So actually, it was kind of a fairly, I'd say positive vibe. I remember talking to people about it, at work and whatever, and they were like, "Yeah, man, yeah, it's good. Yeah, no, I've seen it."
There was so much love though. Like everywhere you went, like as it came out, it was incredible seeing Transformers posters and stuff in shop windows, where you haven't seen them for like 20 years. Right. Like in really major shops and stuff. Like they might have toys in the corner for the years, but you were seeing things in places you weren't used to seeing them. Like it became mainstream in a way that it didn't even in its like pomp in G1, wasn't it? It was everywhere.
Seeing the trailer for the movie in other movies before it came out was a real thing I remember as well. That really got me going as well.
And on TV, stuff like that. Like it's insane. Like just there'd been nothing like it in Transformers, and it was. I can't even imagine the most cynical of person was not swept up in a wave of just like, wow.
I think you would have, if you'd have hated that concept artwork, fair enough. I think by this point of the film being released and the hype it was getting and everything, I think you would have, to have not been swept up in it at least a little bit, you would have almost had to have made a conscious effort by that point to kind of really dislike it. Like I can imagine that there will have been Transformers fans that won't have enjoyed it, of course, fair enough. Mm-hmm. But I think to be hugely cynical about everything that was happening with it at the time, that's a choice at that point, because whether you appreciated every element of the film or not, to see what it was already doing for Transformers and for your franchise, your favorite thing, and not see that as some kind of positive, I think that's a choice.
Yeah, I remember my boss hated it, like because when I went with the people from work, he's a really good friend of mine from years before, and he's a Transformers fan, but not a collector or fan. Like, he was a fan as a kid. and occasionally talked about it in nostalgic terms. But when we came out the cinema, I remember him just looking at me going, "That was one of the worst things I've ever seen. I hated it, absolutely hated it." And it was just like, but that's what I mean. He's not a fan as such. He was a fan as a kid, but to him, it was just like, "This is not what I wanted from a Transformers film." And he just kept saying, "I didn't know where to look. I couldn't tell what was happening."
I do remember some people I went with having that opinion. Absolutely.
The Transformers will return after these messages.
Okay, well, it's time to take a look at our sponsor, TFSauce.com. So we're going to have a quick look in true triple takeover fashion at a little bit of what they've got in stock at the moment and kind of give it a quick appraisal. I've just been having
make fun of what Liam's going to buy.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, what's Liam up to this week? I just had a quick look at the site. There's quite a few things actually that I'm into at the moment. I noticed they've got the old X-Transbots Omnibots up for order. Can't cut that segment out, M.A.S. You've got to leave that in. But they're looking pretty
a few things you're interested in buying, which surprised nobody.
Well, there you go. But I've actually also, as well, I noticed they've just got the old Fans Hobby Armada Megatron, Meg Tyranno, I think it's called, up for pre-order as well. That's just gone up today, I think. And that looks pretty swish. Quite excited about that. I noticed they've got the Transart Black Agent, the Beast Wars Ravage, up in stock now. So I'm very excited about that one as well. And M.A.S., I did think you might be interested in we've talked about it a few times, but the TFC ST Commander.
I see it on the front page. Yeah, that's amazing. It was actually that made me want the original Rolling Thunder.
Right.
So
it's a marvelous toy.
It is, and I think it scales with the new Diaclone toys, doesn't it?
It
and
does.
I remember, desperately wanting to get a hold of that and include it with all those Diaclone toys. That would have been really amazing. But you were talking about the Fans Hobby Armada Megatron. Armada is not something I've ever been interested in, like ever. But I saw your photos of the Micron Densetsu Megatron MD01, and that head sculpt just it grabbed me. I don't know what it was about it. And knowing what Fans Hobby do with their figures, that actually looks like if you go to the TF Source page, it's like one of the first things there, and it's really, really eye-catching. But Ace Hitter is another Fans Hobby thing that is coming my way. That's one I've said yes to.
Can I just say, do you think I'm going to let that slide where you just said MB01? Why when I say O, you always pick me out?
Well, it is MD01. That one actually is MD01.
That
actually technically
actually does have an O in it.
Because O is a letter. So,
Oh
yeah.
my God.
I had it coming.
Yeah, I was waiting.
He's been hanging on to that one, hasn't he? God. What are you into at the
hold
moment,
it down
Liam?
and post it.
Yeah. What are you seeing on there, Liam, that you might go for?
He needs to buy replacement Kingdom tracks, doesn't he?
Well, I'm sure
awesome.
I'm sure there's a children's section here somewhere. Do you want to have a little shop around for it? I don't know.
Do they sell BotBots? I'm in.
Yeah.
Get me in.
BotBots are serious toys, man. Don't be knocking BotBots.
That's that Studio Series Perceptor. That looks fantastic.
That does look really good.
Those things look amazing.
That Retgar looks exceptional. I can't even tell you. I was looking at it and the pictures of Retgar, riding Retgar essentially, and I was just like, wow, that is really cool. Really, really cool. Quite tempted by that. And the Perceptor looks fantastic as well.
They've done a great job of that.
Yeah, Perceptor looks good, and maybe we can avoid making fun of Sweep. But even Coronation Starscream looks nice.
I'm into the Coronation Starscream. I know it's the same toy, and people are a little bit, kind of have opinions on that or whatever. But still, I think it looks. Yeah, it's got a chair. It's got a new hat. It's got a new hat and a little robe. So I think
he
it's pretty
fancy, doesn't he? He's happy.
He does. He's jaunty. Anyway, plenty of stuff up on tfsource.com now. Thank you very much to them for sponsoring the podcast. And do check them out because you know what? They got you covered in terms of new Transformers toys.
We now return to the Transformers.
Can we talk about character choices for the movie? How did you like obviously we had Optimus Prime, we had Megatron, Starscream, understandable, Bumblebee. Well, maybe not so obviously back then, but yes, we had Bumblebee. It wasn't an obvious choice.
This was his rebirth, wasn't it? This is where he came back, is here.
Yeah, and look at the influence that's had on everything since 14 years of Bumblebee.
People forget, you didn't see Bumblebee post G1 at all, did you? He wasn't in any of the RID or any of the Unicron trilogy.
So now we have Barricade in concept art shown as being called Brawl. And you had obviously a couple of Constructicon kind of guys. We had Bone Crusher and we had Brawl, who actually ended up being called Devastator in the movie.
Devastator.
Well,
there were the four of them.
Frenzy.
Blackout as well. Blackout, Barricade, Brawl, and Bone Crusher. All four of them rotated names at one point, and they had Devastator in there as well. There were various names, and they just couldn't settle. And that's
Are they all bees?
I'd
never picked up on that. Barricade, Brawl, Bone Crusher, and
Blackout.
Barry.
And Blackout. Yeah, they are. But
Baz.
The B sharps.
How did you feel about that ensemble?
Yeah, I loved it. I thought
I never knew who Blackout was, but yeah, I mean, I didn't know who Blackout was. I was sold immediately. Same with Barricade.
Yeah, it was never a problem for me that these weren't known characters, and I was never fussed about that. I liked that the Autobots were known names, even if they, varied in terms of how recognizable they were. But even then, I wasn't expecting to see G1 replicated in its entirety on the screen. I think, we'd already seen enough of the designs and stuff. In a way, because the concept artwork was so out there, by the time you saw it in motion and everything, it was, it was fine. And I think the Decepticons looked fantastic. And I think that the Decepticons have never been better in any subsequent film than they were in 2007, personally, because I think they were more, they weren't like fully fleshed out characters or anything, but they looked more distinguishable. Just the fact that one was green kind of helped a little bit, but one was recognizably a tank, one was recognizably a helicopter, one was very recognizably a police car. So that kind of worked for me. Bone Crusher, I don't think, that was probably one of the more out there designs, but even at the time, I remember seeing that clip in the trailers of it going through the bus and just being like, that is the coolest thing I've ever seen. Like, there's nothing beats that. It's like, So I think, again, the fact that it wasn't classic G1, so what? Do you know what I mean? It looks fun. It looks
absolutely
cool.
Right. Very bought in very quickly. Yeah.
I'm going to be the opposite, because I remember really disliking a lot of the designs in the film. And it's not because they weren't G1. I didn't care about that, because we'd already been through RID and the Unicron trilogy, so I was quite happy with other designs. It's because they just, so many of them I couldn't get a read on, and they look so weird. Like, to me, Starscream, like, I really liked how he moved, I liked his jet mode, and I liked his character, but his robot mode looked like a Dorito that had been run over and then eaten by a raccoon and vomited back up, because it's like, you're looking at it going, what is this mess of a thing? And the chicken legs, I was like, it's not what I wanted. I don't want them to look like G1 or anything else in particular. It's just, I don't know, I suppose I like a certain obvious aesthetic, you know what I mean? Like
chunky guys. That's the thing. You like chunky.
Yeah,
it's so funny,
lads.
I like a bit of chunk on my man.
Starscream to be almost the most visibly coherent for me of the Decepticons. Like, I could actually tell. I could probably draw him from memory, but I couldn't do that with Barricade or Brawl, and definitely not Megatron.
But that's the thing. Like, I really liked. Oh my god! How do I keep forgetting his name? Helicopter
Blackout.
Again. Blackout. Oh my god! I know this, and I keep forgetting his name.
Now
but,
forever known
I really
as Helicopter
He looked cool,
Right?
But the way he moves and carries himself, like the way it's fantastic, and his design, it's still quite humanoid. And it's the same with Brawl. I know what I'm looking at, but Starscream in particular, it was really hard, even though he's got like the cockpit chest and stuff like that. And it's weird, because I actually really like the design now that I've got older. I made peace with it, and I love it. It's one of the few movie toys I've got is the Studio Series one, because the jet mode is fantastic. And I like the robot mode, but back then it was just like, it just doesn't look like what I want from robots. But I enjoyed it in the film, if that makes sense. Like, I wasn't anti it, but it was the same with, like, my favorite thing from the movie was Jazz, because it looked recognizable, like something.
Oh, so bummed.
It didn't look like G1, but
I was like, no, he's not going to be in any subsequent movies. I loved Jazz in that movie, really did.
Oh, so unwise. As one of the best bits.
That's
in the
Megatron.
Film. But like, yeah, I know. But he says that just before.
No, he says that when Sam won't give him the cube.
He says that to Spike, doesn't he?
Sam won't give him. Spike.
That's what he says to. But
look at this dinosaur.
Look, let's call him by his real name. His given name.
But we're forgetting Scorponok.
Yeah, see, that was weird, but I like it now. And I liked it in the film. See, again, it's one of the things you see it in motion. You like it, but when you look at the design itself, I'm a bit like, oh, it's just it doesn't tend to a robot. But I like the compatibility.
Scorponok's a weird one because it doesn't transform. And so it's a bit like, it's weird that they went with that as like the poster child of a lot of the trailers, and that they really put Scorponok front and center, didn't they? Which was a weird choice in a way, because it's so unrecognizable as like anything that was Transformers beforehand. And I remember a lot of people were that was a controversial element before the film was released, because that name has very heavy connotation of what it represents prior to 2007. And then suddenly you're like, well, this is not a headmaster and it doesn't transform, and people get very uppity about it, don't they? But still looks cool. I think if you take 2007 as just a very cool sci-fi film, it's great. Like, it's a great design. The shot of it coming up out the sand, all of that, amazing.
Yep. Yeah, there's a thing. How I try and always break it down with the movie characters is there's this ethos in the films that I know a lot of people like, where it's every part of the robot is constructed from a car part. It's like the idea is they laid out all the car parts, and so everything is that. And so to me, it's not something I like, because for me, Transformers, it was the robots are in disguise as cars. They're not the cars, if that makes sense. And I think the movie flips that a bit, where the whole basis of Transformers is wherever they go, they're automatically in disguise, and they take on the forms. I like the idea of them being something else and then having to hide inside, if that makes sense. And so for me, I always think there's a robot inside, we're in a car, rather than it being a car that is a robot. If that makes sense.
Sort of, yeah. I kind of get you where you're going, and it is a really different one. I remember the bit where Optimus appears as a protoform, and then scans the truck and turns into the truck. That was like, oh, okay, that's quite different. And of course, now that's sort of accepted part of canon. That's like happens all the time in Transformers, but that had never been really done before. I think the closest that you'd ever really seen was in the first pilot episode of the cartoon,
the Sky Spy.
where Sky Spy goes and scans stuff, and there was a nod to that, but you'd never seen Transformers just like Bumblebee changing the form of Camaro that he is, or whatever. You've never seen that, where it's just like willy nilly. They're just like, oh, I'm going to be something else now, and so that was a bit of a departure. But
I think that's it as well. The protoforms thing, because they all look the same, not identical, but they're all very slim silver robots. And for me, when the first time I saw that, I was like, I feel like it's taken away so much of what gives Transformers a personality, which is they're different colors, they're completely different looks, and they were all essentially like skeletons from Funny Bones. They're like in a dark street, in a dark house. All these little robots.
Well, that's why the subsequent films and their battle scenes, they were filled with these protoforms, weren't they? And that definitely felt less Transformers to me.
Well, there's no personality with them, I felt, because they're so hard to distinguish from one another. Like, when you see Cybertronian designs now, it's like, that's Optimus Prime, these characters, and they have very recognizable features that you pick out straight away, and then you take on certain traits from them. You can come up with ideas. Like we were saying about the bios and G1 toys, you come up with your own stories. But if you bought toys of just protoforms, there's nothing to distinguish them, and there's nothing there that gives them personality.
I can see what you're saying. I think when you compare that protoform design and you imagine what the Bumblebee movie opening scene, I know it's not necessarily a prequel, and that's not what I'm going on about or any of that, getting into that kind of continuity aspects of it. But if you imagine that Bumblebee scene set on Cybertron with just protoforms, it wouldn't have the same. It wouldn't be good.
Right.
Let's be fair. It wouldn't be. It wouldn't be enjoyable in the same way.
You'd have no idea who anyone was, because they're all silver.
It wouldn't be the same. Just as a funny story, what I will say is we were watching some of the G1 cartoon the other day with my wife, and we're watching it with our son, and she commented and was like, we had seen it before years ago, but and she was like, oh, why do they have their like earthen look, and like Optimus and whatever, when they don't turn into earthen vehicles? What's all that about? I'm just like, well, that's just their look. That's like the way it is. She's like, but wouldn't the parts be different? Like those chests and stuff like that. I'm like, yeah, no, I know, but it is what it is. I mean, you're just gonna go with it. But I think in a way, the protoform thing was such an extreme thing the other way, wasn't it? Of like, oh, they just look like weird aliens on Cybertron, and then it's only when they come to Earth that they sort of resemble cars or whatever. It was a departure for sure.
But that's the thing. Like when you see Ironhide's design in the movie, when he becomes the truck, he looks cool. It's interesting, and it gives him personality and life. But when you see him just before he turns into it as the protoform, you're like, I couldn't tell you if that was someone or someone else, because they just all look the same. And I was actually watching it when I was watching it today. I was really determined to focus on that to see if there were obvious cues. And I know someone's going to throw up a load of pictures, and go, see, they are different, but in the moment when they're moving, you can't tell one from another, and it's because they all look so similar. And I just think you take away so much life. And also, when they're falling to Earth, what's all the stuff that's falling off of them? What are they? Like, I noticed when they come to Earth, there's all bits coming off them. Gold plastic.
It is a weird scene, that whole protoform scene with them coming. I mean, in its way, it's sort of iconic now, isn't it? It's that, but but it hasn't.
It's one of the best scenes in the film. But when you think about it,
scene.
Yeah,
it is. The score, man, the arrival to Earth.
But you're like, how did they get there? Was somebody launching them by catapult from Mars? Is that where they've been? Because it just doesn't. There's no explanation of where they come from or how they are. They're just literally falling out of the sky, and there's all sorts of bits like falling behind them.
Yeah.
What are they?
Particularly as it's never done again in later films. No. Again, not that it matters, but it's sort of a weird thing all to itself for that film, isn't it? It's just like a thing that they did.
Well, I reckon they were in disguise as little meteorites or meteors or asteroids, and they were just like shedding the rocks when they were landing.
Didn't want to get recognized by other meteors.
Exactly. And upset the ecosystem. Yeah.
Wow. Rock lords.
That's what they are.
They're rock lords.
It's a story of rock lords becoming Transformers. That's basically the movie.
It's a
stealth rock lord
collaborative
movie
thing. It's two franchises coming together in one film. There you go.
That's outstanding.
You feeling lucky, punk? Easy, Ironhide. Just kidding. I just wanted to show him my cannons.
We just mentioned it briefly, the soundtrack. So we've got the soundtrack and the score from the movie. How did you guys rate that?
Ooh, I mean, the score is something. It's got to be said.
Fantastic.
It's incredible. Absolutely love it. I think for me now, if you were going to talk about Transformers music in general, like through the 35 years of the franchise or whatever, some of that Jablonski score is right up there for me in terms of just how emotive it is. I can still listen to it now, and I'm right back there at the time. I love it. I think it fits
perfectly true.
The tone of the film perfectly in many ways. Like the arrival from Cybertron scene is iconic partly because of that music, for sure. I think the Autobot theme is immense. I think there's just love it. Absolutely love it.
It's perfectly pitched, and it's a bit like the Rocky soundtracks as well. A soundtrack that's keyed into emotion in it as well. Like every time you hear it, it stirs something in you, and it's very particularly done like that. Like you say, the arrival scene when they're all coming in, and it's just this sense of wonder as they're all falling above their heads and stuff, and the music's just lifting, and it lifts you up with it. But there's the tune that plays when they're battling Scorponok and the jets come in, and it just sort of like goes up and down. I used to listen to that in the gym all the time. It's really motivational. Running about like I
really like the Blackout song, the song from the Attack on Socksent Base at the beginning. I listened to that one quite a lot because I really love the way that music changes once Blackout transforms and starts shooting. I really like that, and when he's stealing the files. But also the song from the Bumblebee transformation scene, just when he's talking to them after beating Barricade. I found that really stirring.
Yeah. Do you know what I will say, though, is that although the Autobot theme is more obvious and it's, stellar and amazing and whatever, the Decepticon theme is also fantastic. It's entirely different. It's creepy as anything. It's like really slowed down. It's got those weird voices in it. It's obviously they've got a choir in or something and kind of vocoded it a little bit. And I absolutely love that. I think it's chilling as anything, and just perfect. Love it. And I remember that in the film as well when all the Decepticons are like mobilizing. That's really good.
One of the things I love about the score on this is the way it's chopped up as well. So it repeats throughout, like different sections of different songs. They just suddenly kick in. Like you remember, like Arrival to Earth, but if you watch the film again, you hear like the start of it earlier on in a different place, and then you hear it like a slightly different version of it later, and it's all very like stirring. And it really like that film. I know Michael Bay was like a music video director and stuff like that, and it plays into the way that soundtrack works so well because it goes with, there's all this iconography in that film, like the bit where Bumblebee stands up at the little sandy mountain and it's night and there's smoke going everywhere and the music rises and you're like, the music fits so perfectly with that.
Yeah, I think a lot of people now talking about MCU films. When you hear the Avengers score, it's like that. It's like that climactic moment, isn't it? Of just like, wow, okay, here we go. They've assembled, what have you, in Endgame and things like that. And to me, it's very much the same thing in the Transformers films. When you hear that Autobot music go, it's like, okay, here we are. Do you know what I mean? This is like very rousing indeed. And I just think it's a little bit heavy-handed at times, the score, but it's still fantastic. And it's no surprise that it was like the kind of heavily influential on a lot of Transformers music at the time. I mean, stuff like Transformers Prime and everything that came after it all went for that sound, didn't it? And a lot of other film scores as well, and a lot of different films really tried to ape what happened with that, for sure.
It really like fits in though, like because we were talking about the scene earlier where Megatron is trying to get Sam, and the oh so unwise bit, and he's clinging onto those like statues, isn't he, of like people in shrouds. Yeah, but the music that's going at the time is like this, like
yeah.
That kind of music, and there's a lot of that, like you were saying with the Decepticon thing. There's a lot of like really sinister music as well.
Yeah, how does it sound? It's almost like I'm there in the theatre. Do you know?
I don't know. It's like druids.
Yeah, it's a bit like that.
Sacrificing.
It's a bit like that.
Sam Witwicky.
Druids, isn't that the last night?
Yeah. And it's funny listening to later films. I still like the music actually throughout the whole series, but it's never as good as in that first one.
There is one tune that stands out, and that's Lockdown's theme in Age of Extinction. I really like that. But then I actually realized that it's just a direct rip of the end music from the second episode of Game of Thrones. So if you listen to the credits music from Game of Thrones, episode 2, season 1, it is basically exactly Lockdown's theme. Yeah.
Really? All right. So earlier, I always say like Revenge of the Fallen is the worst film I've ever seen, or one of the worst films. But I really like the soundtrack in that because there's a different Linkin Park song, isn't there? But they use that throughout the film as well as part of the soundtrack, like the
I think that's
score.
Dark of the Moon.
And I really like the way that.
I think Dark of the Moon is the one with the Linkin Park track that is used in the score as well. Unless they did it for both films, and I don't remember.
Yeah, they did it because they do it when they're going through China. You hear at the start with that's the one with the, what's it called? The little ice cream van, isn't it?
Yep.
That's the second one.
Second one, yeah.
Yeah, and you hear it there. You hear that, not the Linkin Park song from the first film, but they did another one, didn't they? But it is factored into the score, and I really like that as well. That's a really good one for the gym.
Yeah.
Speaking of the soundtrack, so we talked about the score. We got the soundtrack for the first movie as well. And obviously the Linkin Park song is hugely intertwined with the soundscape of that movie, especially like the credit scene at the end as well. It's so strongly tied into that.
Even
but how did you guys? Yes, right. And the other song, I mean, I don't know the name of it. It's when Blackout is chasing Bumblebee, and the car chase starts, and he walks and he dives into the car mode. That was a wow moment in the cinema for everyone as well. And then they come out of the dust. Yeah.
I can't remember which used song it is, but it's the band they used, and they were quite big at the time in the older emo circles. But the Linkin Park songs were so good as well. They really caught on. But I remember because I saw Linkin Park. I've seen Linkin Park loads, and I remember seeing them after that film came out. And particularly after the second one, I remember seeing them at Download, and they played the 2 Transformers songs there, and like all the crowd was there, like very excited for Linkin Park songs. But there was a noticeable shift. Like you saw other people coming in as the Transformers songs kicked in, because it just seemed to
brilliant.
And then when I saw them at the Nottingham Ice Arena a couple of years later as well, and they did it again. They were playing the Transformers songs, but you look around and you can see people who know, like the Transformers, and you see this little look, and you're like, yeah.
I remember us talking to a friend of ours at TFN. Who's a lot younger, I had to say, and she was saying that for her the Linkin Park song was because obviously kind of growing up more as with the films and stuff, childhood, and that music for her was just iconic, just absolutely.
So that's her the touch, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. In a way that I think you have a different relationship with it in that way, don't you? Like I mean. Only in the same way that we listen to the 86 soundtrack so much. And I think it's exactly the same thing. Hard to imagine for us, I'm sure. But
one of my favourite moments with my girlfriend was at one of the downloads after that film. And I remember we were stood on the hill as they were playing the song, and we were both really drunk, but we were both, with all our mates, we were all just really singing that Linkin Park song from the first Transformers film and absolutely loving it, because it's like a big shared experience of like, wow. And it's like, because they're all new metal and all that, all them fans, so we're all there for everything else. But that thing came together, everyone was suddenly like, the Transformers one, and everyone was there like really singing it. It's an amazing memory that I'll always have.
Where is the cube?
So I feel we would be remiss on a Toycast not to talk about toys. But before we do get to the toys of the first movie, I wanted to just talk about the branding and the logos that were used, and just the whole visual style of the 2007 movie. And do you remember the website pre-release? Just the new Transformers logo in the silver and very mechanical metal style. So how did you guys find that? Like, obviously, it was a bit of a departure from what had gone before.
I thought it was great. Like the logo is like probably the closest to the traditional logo that we've had. Like that, it's different in its own way, but it's still quite similar, isn't it? You can see the influences.
I guess I was less taken, to be honest. I don't know. Like, it's fine. I find it a little bit just like a bit generic almost. I like the kind of block grey logos, even like the Autobot and Decepticon logo and everything. I don't know, just I like colourful stuff. Hence why I love things like late G1 and things like that. And it just wasn't that, So I don't know. I think that they went a little bit generic with some of that, but maybe that's what they had to do to kind of reel in the kind of.
Do you think it would have worked aesthetically with just the whole massively military vibe of the movie to have had really colourful logo and gone very visibly red and purple?
I'm sure that's true. I've no doubt. Do you know what I mean? I don't know. For me, like, you look at the Decepticon logo on something like our Triple Takeover artwork. I really love that sort of style. That like
that's very beautiful.
Yeah,
well done.
But that kind of like blocky, just very kind of flat color, matte. That I love. I think that's really kind of stylish. And by comparison, some of the graphics and stuff from the film, they've got that kind of very sort of robotic grey element to them. It's just not as appealing to me, that's all. It's just purely a visual thing. But you're right, it probably does fit the film a little bit better with the kind of military theme and all of that kind of stuff. So yeah.
The branding was so good, like at the time, like you were talking about earlier, the eye above the earth and that stuff. In that you saw that image repeated everywhere, like, and it was such a, because it doesn't show you everything in the film, does it? Like a lot of posters, you get loads, you see the characters, and this didn't. There was still an air of mystery. And
you still remember 747 very clearly from that whole marketing.
Yeah. It's a perfect teaser poster because it doesn't give away anything other than just very subtle hints.
It's funny that we remember 747, even though for us that makes no sense. Because that would be like, with the 7th of April, what is the? Do you know what I mean? Is that a big thing? It's but obviously for Americans, huge. But but you're right. The whole branding of it and everything, it did work at the time, and I was into it. It's just purely now, like looking at it. If I was to say aesthetically, I prefer this thing or the other, it's not my cup of tea necessarily.
And then, of course, that branding, when applied to toy packaging, they had the eye, but then there was like a lot of red on the boxes and the cards for the 2007 toys. And I remember I actually was quite into that. I quite liked the way that the packaging looked for that whole line. And it was very consistent. You had the leader figures in the tall boxes in robot mode, but then you had the Voyagers in vehicle mode in the slightly smaller ones. And then in carded, you had the vehicle modes as well, didn't you? For the carded figures like Bumblebee and like Scorponok didn't have another mode, but so that kind of thing. So I quite like the packaging. Did you?
It's an action master.
He had a robot mode, didn't he? He could stand up.
Sort of, yeah. It was like I've been racking my brain while approaching this segment, trying to remember it. But I mean, let's face it, it wasn't.
When you say he could stand up, is it like a dog standing up trying to get something?
It was like some hind leg business. Yeah, it was that kind of thing.
I think that's what it was. Yeah. With the shooting spear, right?
Apologetic legs.
But were any of you ever drawn to the toys? Like, did you guys ever collect any of the toys from 2007?
Not really. Like, I remember going in to look at them because I was quite obviously taken by the film. But I remember looking at them and they never really appealed to me. Like, the more I looked at them, and I wanted them to. It's a weird thing. Like, I would look through them trying to find one that I was like, wow, I must have this. But then I'd see one being like, oh, I don't like the robot mode. And it's funny, like, when you look at the toys now, I can see why I didn't like them at the time, because a lot of them, they didn't look like the characters on the screen. And I'm not one normally for screen accuracy, but like the one I was really taken with was Jazz. But then when I saw the toy, it's like, oh, it doesn't translate.
No, in 2007 they hadn't done a particularly good job of capturing the movie likeness. It's almost like they hadn't worked out how to incorporate transformation versus screen accuracy versus complexity and that sort of part count. It wasn't quite there yet.
No, I would hold with that.
I do still have a Legends Blackout from that era, so that's about it. But there must have only been like 3 or 4 that I ever picked up, and yeah, I liked them. They were good fun toys, but
there were some fun toys. I had a couple, not many. I mean, we, as I said, my wife had a Bumblebee. She had the old Camaro Bumblebee. I think we had the 2-pack actually. So there was a 2-pack of the new and the old Bumblebee, and I think we had both.
Yes,
I remember that one. In our gaff at the time, and which was surprisingly Transformer free at the time. Masterpieces and a couple of masterpieces and a few 2007 toys, and that was pretty much it at the time. It was a small flat at the time, and I think we had the Leader Optimus, which was a really fun toy actually. I did like it, but again, like Liam said, didn't look necessarily exactly like the screen. You know, there was a lot of divergence for sure. And whilst similar to Liam, I'm not like it's got to look exactly like the screen. I think for the big film, it was kind of disappointing how little some of the toys looked like what they were supposed to. You know, on the
there are a lot of very visible compromises, aren't there? And I think that's what always put me off. Like,
I think it's when you see the transformation in the film, and it's clearly like 2,000 moving parts, you know, to kind of get it from one to the other. And then when you get the toy, and obviously it's not going to be like that, but you know, it's like you fold the head out and flip this over and whatever. And there's a lot of compromise in terms of how it goes from one to the other. So yeah, I think you're right, M.A.S. They just hadn't really kind of got it yet in terms of how to translate those designs to toy form.
It's true. Having said that, in a statement that will not surprise you, when I was into something, I went full on. I bought everything.
That's very unlike you.
Yeah, so I was in the US in 2007 when the movie had come out.
Yeah.
We went to Walmart, to Kmart, we went to Toys R Us, we went everywhere we could. We went in Rhode Island, we went in New York, we even went in Connecticut, because we went to Manchester, Connecticut on the way to New York. And I remember taking basically the entire first wave of 2007 toys, packaging them up and shipping them to myself from the US at BotCon, because I wanted them all. There were Mountain Dew bottles that they were selling in supermarkets with Transformers wrappers. I bought those. They had these little, in Radio Shack we went to, they had these guns where you would charge the car on top and then you could shoot the car off. So not only did I pick up all of those, I even asked them if I could take the store display. And yes, they let me take the store display. The movie had just obviously come out. And in 2007, all of the hotels that were registered to BotCon in Rhode Island had exclusive hotel keys. And they had room keys, which had different characters on them. So, of course, there was a bunch of us going around making sure we all had all the room keys and buying them off people who didn't want them afterwards. So I had a full collection of the room keys. There was just anything I could get my hands on, I did. I mean, I've had to work through so much tat in the last few years of clearing out my collection. Magazines like Rides had interviews with Tyrese Gibson. There was an issue where Megan Fox was in it, so I bought any related magazines, any posters. I even took like a display off a wall of Bumblebee. Serves me right. It was nicked off me eventually at that BotCon 2007, along with the Diaclone powered convoy. Can you believe someone nicked that from me?
Ooh.
Yeah.
What?
That was taken from me in the lobby of the hotel that I was staying at BotCon.
What, like, did you just turn around and sort of just half
we had so much stuff. We had so many bags, and I was with the Space Bridge, who was obviously, he was dealing at the show. So he had cases of toys.
Dealing toys, right?
Yes, dealing toys.
Yeah. Cool.
And I had just put this little bag down with the Bumblebee display in it, and my Diaclone powered convoy was in that little bag as well, and somebody just had it, and it was gone, which is very sad. But
That's terrible, man. In that environment as well, do you know what I mean? Like in that, you really don't conventions and stuff. It's like a whole.
Stuff gets nicked at conventions all the time.
I know it does. I know, but it's just so disappointing that it's like you're all there for a common purpose and just like. Well,
yeah, but you get all sorts at a gathering like that, don't you?
Yeah.
Anyway, so I shipped these toys home. When I got home, the first movie toy I bought was Jazz, because like you, Liam, I was super into Jazz. And even though it wasn't like highly complex, it was still fun because I was so into it. I gave it a lot of leeway, that it was different. And obviously, remember, this is just after the first couple of waves of classics. So that's where we were in terms of toy technology. And I was mostly a G1 collector. I didn't really pick up many classics besides Starscream and Mirage. So
still very chunky Unicron trilogy like, isn't it? There's a lot of that.
I mean, the Prime was really chunky, but I loved the vehicle mode on the Prime. And I remember there was so many things in the UK we got that weren't available in the US. They came out in the UK first. Like there was a Prime and an Optimus 2-pack, the Voyager Optimus and the Deluxe Bumblebee. There was, like you said, the old Bumblebee and the new Bumblebee. I remember when that new Bumblebee came out, it was like really scarce. And every time I'd see one in stores, I would grab the Concept Camaro because we'd seen it on the Hasbro tour of the Rhode Island factory. And we'd seen what that toy was going to look like. And it was like, I can't wait for that to hit stores. It was probably the most accurate looking toy of the lot of them at that time because Megatron really didn't look. I didn't even open my Megatron in the end. I had the Leader Megatron, never opened it. And I never got Leader Brawl either because that was super tough to find and mega expensive.
That was for years, though, that toy.
I remember getting the Blackout and being really impressed with Blackout. And we saw all the artists and designers at Rhode Island. They were hand painting the repaint of that Blackout toy, which was Evac. And they were making these toys. We saw so many hard copies and prototypes and test shots on that tour. And the movie was really front and center. Like all the prototypes that they had for the movie, all the concept art, they'd stuck that front and center for people to see on the tour. Like a resin cast prototype of that Optimus Prime voice changer helmet that you were just showing us. They had that on display. And they were showing us real gear toy designs on concept boards and stuff. So yeah, I bought all of those toys in the first wave. And I remember going to Argos because that was the only place you could get the Night Watch version of the Leader Prime. It was like Leader Prime, but in blue, dark blue and black. Yeah. And you got a massive lenticular Bumblebee poster with it. I remember going to Woolworths and asking them like, hey, do you guys mind if I take the toy display? The big, massive standees they had. I was walking down Wood Green High Road with my friend carrying a freaking 6-foot Optimus Prime display when they were done with it. My house was full of this crap. And I couldn't even give it away by the end when I finally got rid of that stuff. It was just one of those things where I got totally caught up in it, massively hyped, and collected everything. And in the end, it was worth nothing to anybody, really. A lot of it I gave away. But some of it...
That doesn't sound like you at all.
Yeah, right. But no, I was super into the toys that year. I still really like the Starscream. I think I would buy that again, that Voyager Starscream.
I remember you had the standees. You had the Megan Fox and Shia LaBeouf standees. Was that right?
No,
or just Megan
only
Fox?
robot standees. Just robots.
You had a thing. Maybe they were on the same thing. It was years ago now, a couple of years back, at TFN, and you were trying to get rid of it. And it was like, maybe they were together on the same thing, and it was like a bigger fold-out cardboard thingy.
Yeah, they might have been front and center on it, but then you had like Megatron and Optimus heads on either side.
Right, okay.
Because I remember I got one from a cinema as well. But there was a really big one where all the characters were attached by Velcro to a central image, and that was a massive store display. And I had to store that in separate pieces behind a cupboard for years because it was so big. But yeah, my mum was so thrilled when I got rid of those. And they just ended up in recycling. I mean, I offered them for free to people. Like, I was like, just come and pick it up.
Is like
no one wanted them.
The most classic M.A.S.
really
thing
was.
ever.
Yeah,
It's
really
just
was.
like the insight into who M.A.S. is goes all in when you really like
so
all
into
in.
that toy line, yeah.
I remember having when the DVDs came out. I remember having the posters from the video stores. Like it was like a plastic one, where the sort of like vacuum done or whatever. And they sort of stick out a little bit. So I remember a mate of mine worked at I think it was like called Silver Screen, one of those shops, a chain store, and he kept giving me those, and they were pretty cool. But
I had the DVD.
amazing
I think I still got it actually. The Transforming DVD. Have you seen that? With
the Bumblebee.
The Bumblebee,
Yeah.
and there's one for the Revenge of the Fallen as well. I think that kind of has like a plastic case that transforms sort of into a robot. It's a bit naff, but it's kind of fun.
Yeah, it was totally enough. So obviously in 2007, a lot of the toys weren't particularly screen accurate, and they were mainline toys, mostly, all mainline toys. But I don't know whether we're going to do episodes on the subsequent movies and eras of those toys, but when they got to Revenge of the Fallen in about 2009, we had, we were looking at masterpiece level Transformers, and even though they weren't actually masterpiece toys, they were repurposed mainline toys, but we had Human Alliance as well. And I feel like at that period of time was when we really started to get screen accuracy and sort of more high-end movie toys. And so Sixo, you would have been into the masterpiece at that time, I guess.
Yeah. Well, not so much actually at the time with the first two MPM toys, as they are, movie masterpiece toys, were repurposed from essentially what were mainline toys, and then kind of brought out later. But I had both of those at one stage or another. The Starscream, actually, I still think is really good. I think if it had bicep swivel, it would be a perfect representation of that character in toy form. But yeah, it's funny to me that actually the best, well, it's a subjective thing, of course it is, but I suppose the most screen accurate representations of those characters from 2007, if anything, have all come in
third
years.
Parties, right?
Well, I wasn't going to say third parties. I was just going to say in years later, much following, way after the films themselves, to the point where, actually, I think the MPM toys that you're getting now are, generally speaking, really good. There's been I just recently did some photos of Ratchet, that's just come out not so long ago. And that was, for me, completing that Autobot lineup, the 5 core Autobots in MPM form. And it was very, very rousing experience. I loved it. And, those 5 toys, in a way, it's really funny to see, because it's a culmination of something that's been many years in the making. And they're not all perfect toys, but they are fantastic looking toys. They are, there is a kind of marvel at the engineering in them and everything. And actually, as a whole package, despite the flaws and everything that you get in that set, it's still wonderful to see those Autobots represented so accurately and so stunningly in toy form. Seeing all 5 of them lined up in car form and in robot mode is immense. It's absolutely,
and it's
brilliant.
Obvious that there's still a desire and a market for these toys, even though they are the characters from the 2007 movie. Even Jazz.
I think so. There's a bit of a trend now with Bumblebee, the film, having kind of taken over that. So, like even with MPM, you've got MPM Optimus that's just come out, stuff like that. So there's a bit of a trend, I think, towards, like in Studio Series as well, the kind of straying off a little bit towards that. But I think there is still an appetite. I think there's still a lot of people that would love to see more of the 2007 designs done. I'd be well up for more.
We started to get that with Human Alliance in 2009. Like, we got a Human Alliance Jazz, which was bordering on being called a masterpiece. It was so fantastic a figure, great construction, beautiful modes, top accuracy, amazing transformation. Like, this was top end,
extremely complex as well.
Beautiful display piece, like truly beautiful. I thought the Human Alliance Bumblebee and Sideswipe were great. The Barricade was gorgeous.
Roadbuster, that's the only one I had, and that was fantastic.
I agree with you. Roadbuster was one I bought much later, and it was great. So we did start to get like proper high end, and they weren't priced high end. These were still £40, £50, that kind of area. So there were that option for having super accurate, slightly more complex movie toys was brilliant, and there was such a desire for them. So the fact that it's moved on to Masterpiece now and really super complex, highly screen accurate ones, it's almost a shame they didn't come earlier for me. And even maybe 10 years ago, I would have gone crazy for them. But now I just can't even imagine buying movie toys again, like of that description.
But this is one of the things, that makes the movie toys so interesting. Like, there's no other series like it, because they're not all a homogenous line, but the idea in the movie toys is for every film they're refining the same design, and the toys you see, if you look at each movie's toys, you see the same designs but better or closer to the screen. Whereas if you look at G1 and then Generations, you see the Generations, you get different takes on those same sort of characters, but they're not all just trying to get to that to the perfect jazz. Whereas you get to the Studio series now, and they're unrecognizable from them early toys because they look so good. Same with the masterpieces, and you don't see that in any other Transformers line because it's not the same idea, is it? With all the movie toys, it's always to look as accurate because that's what the cars are and the vehicles, and it's amazing seeing that over like 15 years how
Right.
they've evolved.
I wonder
in that way.
how many, someone will know, I'm sure, how many Bumblebee movie toys there are. You know, just to try and get something that looks like that character from the one film. There must be, I don't know, I mean, dozens, hundreds, I don't know.
Yeah, I did a TF Source Collector interview with a guy who had a room entirely dedicated to Bumblebee, and a lot of it was movie toys. The guy's name was Ben. You should check it out, man. It was an incredible display of purely...
Is it Bendel-B?
But yes, it was all Bumblebee toys. You're right. It was just so... just prolific with putting out Bumblebee toys.
It's crazy, isn't it?
It's the same with the Optimus Prime, though. Like, every year, it seemed there's even now, you still get, like, multiple releases of that original movie toy, like, in a new form. And I remember, like, there was a joke a little while ago, because people always used to say, oh, God, G1 Optimus Prime. But then I remember people getting really excited in Studio Series when they did a new version of that movie toy with a more accurate trailer hitch. And you're like, it's the same.
Yeah.
And people are like, excited. Like, no, but the trailer hitch is, well, we've wanted this trailer hitch. And you're like, that's fair, but that's what the movie toys are. They just inch closer to as accurate as they can get. Like, the masterpiece is amazing. I just want one of the few I own.
I kind of now feel tempted to see how far they've come with perfecting those movie toys, because I have so many clear memories of 2007 and Human Alliance in 2009 and mainline stuff, but then that's when I stopped buying them. So I think Dark of the Moon, I had a couple of Human Alliances as well. I never bought Soundwave, as it happens. Buster Prime is the one I remember as the most complex movie toy I owned. And
that was a real
stunning.
desirable thing. That was like,
massively so.
everybody wanted that toy. That was like the one, wasn't it? So,
For years, that was like the number one, wasn't it? That was the one.
Because it was
The
as
finish on it was delightful.
Yeah. And it looked, you know, about as close as you could get, wasn't it? Everybody sort of touted it as like the one to get for screen accuracy and whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So, have you seen the 3.0 stuff that's coming out now as well, which looks
I have
incredible.
seen it, yeah. I mean, that's incredible stuff. Like, looking at your photos of the Bumblebee movie stuff, I mean, I think the only struggle I would have is I don't mind non-transforming toys. When they look that good, they serve a purpose. But I wonder if the masterpiece versions of those toys do both modes enough justice, because I really did love the alt modes of everything they used in the 2007 movie. Like, those cars were gorgeous. I even like the Ironhide and the Ratchet, and it just reminds me, I don't know if you guys ever experienced it, but those toys for 2007, especially the Voyagers, they had quite a lot of automorph in them. Like, I remember Ratchet's legs very distinctly was the first time I kind of experienced automorph in a Transformer. I could see what they were going with, and obviously that then evolved in the further movie lines that they did. But yeah, I mean, I can see the appeal of having a totally beautiful cast of the first movie now in the best versions of them that there are.
Yeah, like, I have the movie masterpiece of Optimus Prime and Bumblebee, and they're just spectacular. Like, they're, you know, as much as I love MP10 and stuff, I don't look at another one and think they've captured it as well as that movie masterpiece Optimus Prime. Like, when I look at it, it just looks like the screen come to life in a way I don't think any other toys does. But it's because of that movie aesthetic and it being realistic, if that makes sense, rather than looking like a cartoon or a toy. And there's a different sort of ethos to it.
Humans don't deserve to live.
They deserve to choose for themselves.
And you will
Die with them.
We've talked about toys, we've talked about the branding, we've talked about fandom and just the reaction generally, but of course it all comes back to the movie for 2007. So how about we all just talk about our favourite scene from the 2007 movie, the one that really stands out, that if you were just going to put the DVD on or the Blu-ray or whatever and just fast forward to one scene, which one would it be?
For me, it's the obvious one. It's the blackout scene. I just think that, I know we spoke about it loads, but I just think that is such a perfect encapsulation, not just of the film, but of everything around the film. Because we all, like we said, that's the thing. It was like this instant rush, and that's the opening to the movie. That's where you walk into the movie universe for the first time.
It's the Transformers movie universe entrance. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and that is such a statement. And it's got the original sound effect is even thrown in there, the transformation sound effect. That bit when he sets off the little EMP or whatever, and it blows the windows out and stuff. And when they're running about, and it's like the military stuff at that time was still quite new, and it was interesting to see it like in that setup, because we were still at the start of the war with Afghanistan. It's that era, isn't it? We're like 5 or 6 years in, so seeing a film like that, and I just don't think anything tops it in the Transformers movies. I think that is the scene, and it's the obvious one, but it is that good because everything about it. Even we were talking about earlier how it starts off in daytime, but when he transforms, it's nighttime. Watching it again today, it's one of the first times I actually picked up. Each scene, you see the sun going down a little bit more and a little bit more, and so it actually sort of makes a little bit sense. And yeah, I just think it's
check
so
out the
beautifully
day-night apologist for the Bay movie here.
Nighttime, daytime.
Sixo, what about you? What's your standout scene from the 2007 movie?
Oh, well, I think, you couldn't have a discussion like this without mentioning, surely, the scene where the dog urinates on the robot. No, that's not the one I'm going to go for. That's not the one. That's not what I'm going for. We can all live without that. No, I think probably the Autobot arrival scene. I think it's again, it's another classic. It's obvious. Hey ho, sue me. I think the scene, everything from watching the Autobots arrive, the whole bit of everybody kind of going crazy as the asteroids are landing and all of that. They're not asteroids, haha, asteroids in disguise, and then whatever that is, and then the bit to the music kind of kicking in, the Autobots arriving. It's very nicely done. Like even little touches of the siren suddenly bleeping, on Ratchet. As you're aware that more Autobots are kind of entering the scene, and suddenly the siren goes off and things like that, through to that montage of all 5 of them transforming in unison, I think is really well done. And to be honest, at the time, I mean, I've never seen anything like that. Like the CGI was incredible at the time. Still, as you said, Maz, I think holds up now, that scene. But honestly, I mean, 5, 6, 7 films in with this franchise, it's hard to appreciate just how jaw-dropping that whole sequence was at the time. And even seeing it now, there's a bit of nostalgia thrown in with it, I'm sure. But I think it's just very, very exciting film sequence for me that will never go away. I showed that to my boy, that whole bit, recently. As a little snippet. He's not seen the whole film, but I did show him that bit, and even he was like, whoa, do you know what I mean? As they're all transformed.
I can imagine, yeah.
So, yeah, it's very exciting.
That transformation is a signature moment, isn't it, from that film? Like, I don't know if you guys remember, but a lot of the press stuff you would see would be like little making of bits, and it would always be that Optimus Prime transforming, and they would talk about how they laid out all the parts for the truck and stuff. So that's why it goes on for so long. It's you see almost every part of a vehicle.
Yeah,
it was like they were like so proud of it, and rightly so, because it's spectacular.
Well, exactly. There are bits in this film, and certainly in the later films, where they just they almost don't take their time with it enough. Do you know what I mean? Like they whiz through things, and it's all blurry and like, what's going on here? Do you know what I mean? But there are moments in the 2007 film where they do actually allow themselves to just slow it down just that little bit and just kind of luxuriate in what's going on almost. And that is one of those moments where they make the most, things like the wheels stopping on Optimus's legs and stuff like that. It's all there, and they really make the most of what's going on in that sequence. And I think it's a culmination of all of the design work that went into that robot mode and that transformation. All of the incredible effects work and everything in there as well, the direction, all of it all adds up. And it's, I think, very, very incredible scene.
I think those two would be my picks as well. Absolutely. Those are the bits I would always forward to or rewind to. And we spoke about it earlier, the scene where Starscream transforms in midair and starts taking out the other Raptors is one I've always really, really loved as well.
Can I also just give a quick shout out to that scene? What's Sixo was talking about, but the kid who runs across the thing shouting, "This is 500 times better than Armageddon," or whatever.
Yeah,
that bit. It still makes me laugh every time I
yeah.
see it. Like it just, and then Ratchet just like rolls out of the compound, and it's really funny because they're all watching him, going, "What's making that noise?" And he just rolls out, and they're just like, "Oh, it obviously can't be this truck."
He's 47 now.
Yeah,
He said that kid. He's probably getting on for retirement age before too long. Do you know what I mean?
You risked your life to protect the cube.
No sacrifice. No victory.
Well, that basically covers everything we wanted to say about the 2007 movie and the scene and the toys surrounding it at the time. I want to give another thanks to TF Source, our sponsor, for supporting the show. Please do remember to check out tfsource.com for all of your recently enabled movie-related toy needs, because that does kind of tend to happen when we do an episode. So do check them out, tfsource.com. And I also want to give a shout out to our top tier patrons, our Sixo's butlers. So I want to say a big thank you to Nick, to Jonathan False Logic Howard, Dean Watts, Danny Roberts, Chris C137, Andy, Preston, Brian Fox, and Cannon, and also Chris. So thank you so much for your support, guys. Very much appreciated. And Sixo, do you want to tell them a bit more about our Patreon?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's it's going really well for us. It's a relatively new venture, but we're really trying to put a lot of heart and soul into it. And you can get a lot of additional content on our Patreon. So it's available at patreon.com/triple takeover, all one word. And there is a lot of exclusive content on there. So not only do you get to listen to these episodes early, so if you're listening to this now before the kind of general admission, if you like, then congratulations. Well, welcome to the club. But also you get a lot of outtakes and things like that as well. And I think for me, the really kind of quality bit of, the kind of very special bit of content on there is the bonus minisodes that we do. So we've just done an extra one on the 1985 Autobot cars, which went live not so long ago. And, as I say, all those Sixo's butlers people, they will be able to listen to that. And if you want to sign up, then please do. We're very, very grateful. And for us, just like along with the sponsorship, it just helps us to kind of keep the lights on and keep the whole thing going.
Absolutely. And speaking of social media, you can follow Triple Takeover on social media. We are on Facebook as Triple Takeover, one word. We are on Instagram and Twitter at @triple_takeover. And don't forget to follow the Instagram for a lot more photo content than we put out on our other social channels as well. Liam, where can our followers find you on social?
Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, all at Toybox Soapbox.
Sixo?
I'm all the same, and YouTube at Sixo TF.
And I'm at TFsquareone, that's one word, on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. So fate has yielded its reward, a new episode to call done. We are Triple Takeover, and we send this message to any surviving listeners taking refuge amongst other era of Transformers. We are here, we are waiting.